To all you rational thinkers, I am your strategic observer, Maggie Liu. Today we're going to dissect the narrative system with the greatest information density and longest spanning design in this series so far. Let's take a look. When Pei Xiaoye slapped a divorce agreement in front of me, Ji Mingyue was dancing the Sogdian whirl across a floor covered in gold leaf. The best private chamber in Fan Tower was filled with noble sons from the capital. The pipa music raced, and the fumes of wine were overpowering. Dressed in sheer scarlet gauze, she spun to Pei Xiaoye's knees, suddenly tore the golden bell from her wrist, and dropped it into a wine cup. Lord Pei promised to marry me. This humble woman waited half a year, only to hear that Madame Qin understands the greater good. She lifted the cup, her gaze passing over Pei Xiaoye to settle upon me, whom he had forced to attend. Since she understands the greater good, she might as well surrender her place today and let me see the Marquis's sincerity. The entire chamber roared with laughter. Pei Xiaoye did not rebuke her. Instead, he drew a sheet of paper from his sleeve and pushed it toward my hand. Wang Shu, sign it. I lowered my eyes. The paper was not a repudiation notice, but a carefully worded mutual divorce agreement. Pei Xiaoye's name, fingerprint, and the Marquis's private seal were all present, with a space left at the end for mine. He bent close to my ear and lowered his voice. It is only a performance. Mingyue holds a shipment I urgently need, and she refuses to turn it over unless I grant her the status of principal wife. After you sign, you will continue living in the Marquis's estate. Your monthly allowance and expenses will remain unchanged. Once the goods are dispatched, I will bring you back to the main courtyard. By the end, impatience entered his voice. You cannot speak and dislike seeing people anyway. What does a title matter to you? He expected the words to redden my eyes and make me tremble, to make me bow my head first as I had countless times before. I merely glanced at the green jade seal pouch at his waist. The Qin family trade seal was inside it. Half a month ago, I discovered 3,000 extra bolts of cloud brocade in Qin Silk House's accounts, but their destination was blank. The shopkeeper said Pei Xiaoye had used the Qin trade seal to remove them. He was my husband and managed the business on my behalf, so no one dared stop him. When I questioned him, he stroked my head and smiled, saying he was making a batch of winter uniforms for the frontier army and would use the profit to build me a warm pavilion. The next day, I found black cotton fibers on the sole of his boot that did not belong to the silk house. That cotton clumped in water and smoked green in flame. It was rotten stuffing washed from the old bedding of corpses in an illicit southern city workshop. Mixing 30% into a garment could halve its cost, but at the northern border, the clothing would not survive a single snowfall. From that day onward, I asked no further questions. I changed the Qin family's hidden seal verification mark, inventoried the warehouse's intercepted correspondence, and had Kuiju bribe a wine-serving page at Fan Tower. Last night, the page reported that Pei Xiaoye planned to use a divorce agreement at the banquet to placate Ji Mingyue, and had even invited a clerk from the capital prefecture to witness it. He had built the stage for me. Naturally, I would come and finish the performance. Seeing me hesitate, Pei Xiaoye raised his voice to the others with a smile. My wife is the most understanding of women. Forget a divorce agreement signed for show. Even if Mingyue asked her to surrender the main courtyard today, she would not object. Summoner at the feast raised his cup and jeered. Brother Pei certainly knows how to govern a wife. Sister-in-law cannot even say no. How could she ever embarrass you? Another burst of laughter followed. Kuiju was furious enough to charge out, but I held her hand and removed the pen prepared inside my sleeve. The instant Pei Xiaoye saw the pen, satisfaction flashed through his eyes and he personally ground my ink. Ji Mingyue also stopped dancing and stood behind him to watch me, the string of eastern pearls on her wrist swaying as she folded her arms. Qin Jewel House had purchased those pearls last month, recorded in the accounts as winter medicine for the young madam. The red gold phoenix hairpin in her hair, the jade pendant at her waist, and the dancing shoes studded with southern pearls had also been paid from my accounts. I lowered my pen and wrote the 3 characters of my name, Qin Wangshu, at the bottom of the agreement. Then I bit my thumb and pressed down my fingerprint. The chamber fell silent for an instant, then erupted in even louder cheers. Pei Shaoyi snatched away the agreement without even looking at me. He turned, wrapped an arm around Ji Mingyue, and held the paper before her eyes. Do you believe me now? She would not dare leave the house without me. Signing this changes nothing but what she is called. Once you enter the estate, she will still keep your accounts. Ji Mingyue leaned into his arms with a smile and reached for my face. Elder sister truly is sensible. Once I become the mistress, you can keep my account, and we sisters can. I tilted my head away from her hand, wrote 4 words on paper, and passed them to the capital prefecture clerk in the corner. File it immediately. The clerk had only intended to curry favor with the Pei family, but his face changed the instant he read the words. He looked behind me. 2 household and marriage officials in blue robes emerged from behind the screen, accompanied by the ward chief and 2 female officials. The senior marriage official opened the petition I had submitted to the capital prefecture the day before and read aloud. Qin Wangshu declared yesterday that should Pei Shaoyi publicly sign and seal a mutual divorce, it shall be deemed voluntary on both sides and no mere jest. Today, the document, fingerprints and witnesses are all present. Under the household and marriage laws of Great Zhou, the agreement shall be accepted on the spot and the marriage removed from the register tomorrow. The smile froze on Pei Shaoyi's face. Who told you to file it? He seized the clerk by the collar. I invited you here to witness the matter for Mingyue, not to meddle. The marriage official's face turned red from his grip, yet he protected the official seal against his chest. Mind your words, my lord. A marriage register is not a toy for the drinking table. Both parties have signed and sealed it. How can it be real when you wish it real and false when you wish it false? I retrieved the divorce agreement from his hand, laid it flat on the table, and personally dipped the seal into vermilion paste. At the moment the official seal came down, every instrument in the chamber happened to fall silent. The glaring red mark covered both our names and crushed Pei Shaoyi's final scrap of hope. I raised my pen and wrote another short note. From this day forward, Pei and I are fully separated in marriage. My dowry, private property, and the Qin family firms have no further connection to the Pei household. Property managed by the Pei family must be returned within 3 days. Every day beyond that shall be treated as unlawful appropriation. Pei Shaoyi read it, first stunned and then sneering. You are serious. He crumpled the note and threw it at my feet. Qin Wangshu, do not forget that when your parents died, it was the Pei household that took you in and raised you for 9 years. Your house deeds, shop deeds, and trade seal are all in Pei hands. Without me, you cannot even enter Qin Company's doors. I looked at the seal pouch at his waist and smiled at him for the first time. My smile darkened his face. Just as he reached out to seize me, orderly footsteps sounded from below. More than a dozen Qin Company workers carried wooden chests upstairs. Behind them came shopkeepers from 3 capital silver shops and 2 silk houses, along with street patrol officers. Shopkeeper Joe placed an account book on the table and bowed to me. Proprietor, everything you ordered us to investigate has been clarified. Pei Shaoyi stared at him. What did you call her? Ignoring him, shopkeeper Joe opened the ledger and read before the crowd. 1 pair of red gold filigree phoenix hairpins, 800 taels. Charged to Qin Jewel House, 24 South Sea Eastern Pearls. 1,600 taels. Charged to Qin Jewel House, 12 bolts of cloud brocade, 1 jade pendant set, and 3 pairs of Hetian jade bracelets, totaling 3,470 taels, all forcibly withdrawn by Pei Shaoyi with the proprietor's old seal. With each item he read, everyone's gaze moved another inch over Ji Mingyue's body. At last, her expression changed. She protected the phoenix hairpin in her hair. Shaoyi gave these to me, I answered on paper. He used my money to give you gifts. You should ask him for shame, not ask me for an accounting. Samanan in the chamber could not hold back and burst out laughing. Ji Mingyue flushed scarlet with humiliation and raised a hand to overturn the table. You mute. A street patrol officer rested a hand on his saber. Madam Qin reported the theft 3 days ago. The receipts and item numbers for the stolen property are all present. Until the stolen goods are fully investigated, anyone who damages them will answer at the capital prefecture. Kuiju stepped forward and pulled the phoenix hairpin from Ji Mingyue's hair. When Ji Mingyue tried to resist, the two female officials seized her arms from either side. They removed the pearls, jade bracelet, and pendant, even taking the southern pearl dancing shoes from her feet on the spot. The courtesan who had dazzled the entire room moments earlier was left in nothing but thin red gauze, standing barefoot on the gold leaf. No one spoke for her. The men who had jeered loudest lowered their gazes, afraid that their own gifts might also have questionable origins. Pei Xiaoye removed his outer robe and wrapped it around her, shouting, "Enough! I will repay you for these things." I pushed the abacus before him. Shopkeeper Joe continued, "Over the past 6 months, young Master Pei withdrew 78,000 taels in cash from Qin Company. 13,000 was spent on Miss G, while the destination of another 65,000 remains unknown. The proprietor has notified 9 banks that from tonight onward, no promissory note in the Pei family's name shall be redeemed from Qin Company." This time the chamber truly fell silent. 78,000 taels could not be spent merely on wine and women. Several wastrel nobles who had partnered with Pei Xiaoye exchanged glances and quietly edged toward the door. Pei Xiaoye slammed the ledger close. How can using money between husband and wife be theft? Even after our divorce, what was already spent belongs to the Pei family. I wrote, "Then let us go to court and have the capital prefect calculate it for you." He looked at my words, veins bulging at his temples, then suddenly lowered his voice. "Wangshu, stop making trouble. That shipment concerns more than money. Come back to the estate with me now, and I can pretend none of this happened." Before my pen touched paper, a cold shout sounded from below. "Which shipment?" A squad of black-clad constables burst through the chamber door, each with an ebony court of judicial review token at his waist. Their leader was a tall, straight-backed man in a black cloak dusted with fine snow. His gaze swept over Pei Xiaoye's face before finally settling upon me. He threw a cut-open winter uniform onto the wine table. There was no new cotton inside, only blackened, clotted old stuffing. Several dried streaks of blood mingled with the cotton, giving off a revolting stench. 3,000 winter uniforms for the Northern Frontier Army. 20 were sampled, and everyone was filled with old stuffing from the epidemic ward. The man displayed his Court of Judicial Review token. The shipping order bears the Qin family trade seal, and the person responsible signed as Qin Wangshu. Pei Xiaoye looked as though someone had seized him by the throat. His anger vanished without warning. The instant I saw his expression, I knew the net I had spent half a month awaiting had finally dropped its first rope. The man bent toward me, his voice entirely without warmth. "Madam Qin, now that your divorce is settled, come with me to the Court of Judicial Review and explain these 3,000 lives." Outside Fan Tower, the snow fell thick and fast. Xi Linyuan, Vice Minister of the Court of Judicial Review, gave me no chance to ride in my own carriage. He ordered the constables to seal 4 warehouses in Qin Company's name, then placed Pei Xiaoye, Ji Mingyue, and me in 3 separate prison carts. Not one of us was spared a wooden kang because of status. Before boarding, Pei Xiaoye was still shouting, "Lord Xi, the goods belong to the Qin family. The seal belongs to Qin Wangshu, and I merely contacted buyers on her behalf. She is turning against me now because of our divorce. Do not let her deceive you." Xi Linyuan turned. "Say one more word, and I will first charge you with obstructing an investigation." Pei Xiaoye fell silent, but looked at me through the cart curtain. There was no panic in his eyes, only threat. He was certain I dared not reveal that the trade seal had been stolen. Once I admitted the seal was in his hands, I would have to explain why I had discovered it half a month earlier, yet failed to report it immediately. If the 3,000 winter uniforms truly reached the border, my silence could still be treated as knowing concealment. This was the chain he had left around me. Unfortunately for him, those uniforms had never left the capital. When the prison cart reached Vermilion Bird Avenue, I knocked 3 times against its wall. Kuiju immediately jumped down from the rear cart carrying 3 account freezing orders I had prepared, then raced separately toward Yongtai Bank, the Eastern Market Silk Guild, and Qin Company headquarters. When a constable tried to stop her, I passed out a paper. The Court of Judicial Review sealed only the warehouses connected to the case. It did not forbid me from suspending payments from my own businesses. If the Marquis's estate transfers money while I am questioned, will your lordship repay the shortfall? After reading it, the lead constable dared not accept that responsibility and could only let her go. Shi Linyuan turned his horse back from the front and glanced at the paper. Sitting in a prison cart, yet still thinking about silver. I wrote, a person can be falsely accused, silver cannot. Where it comes from and where it goes are more reliable than mouths. He studied me for a moment, folded the paper, and placed it in his sleeve. I hope your accounts remain so firm once we reach the court. The first interrogation lasted from late at night until dawn. 5 objects lay on the table: the military supply contract, a sample of the Qin family trade seal, a dye-house material receipt, a workshop wage book, and black cotton removed from the winter uniforms. Shi Linyuan did not ask about the grievances between Pei Shoye and me, he merely pushed over the contract. On the 3rd day of the 9th month, Qin Company accepted an order for 3,000 winter uniforms, due on the 20th day of the 10th month. Your name is on the contract, and the seal pattern matches the Qin family's old records, explain. I took the pen and wrote, the seal is false, the name imitated, and Qin Company did not make the goods. Evidence? I asked him to bring hot water and soak the lower right corner of the contract. A pale grey layer soon appeared across the paper. While thin blue lines bled around the edge of the seal paste, Shi Linyuan's gaze shifted faintly. I wrote, since the 8th month, the Qin trade seal has used paste mixed from cinnabar, red gold powder, and storax oil. Heat only makes it redder. This seal contains indigo and was copied from the old impression. The old seal was in Pei Shoye's hands, but on the 28th day of the 8th month, I ordered every branch to discontinue it. Since the 9th month, any large Qin contract must be verified by both the trade seal and my personal flourish. This agreement bears a seal but no new flourish. If you discovered the old seal in Pei Shoye's hands, why did you not report it? Because I did not know what he intended. Had I taken the seal then, he would only have chosen a more concealed path. I left him the false seal because I wanted to identify the Qin insider releasing goods for him. Shi Linyuan tapped 2 fingers against the table. So you used the Frontier Army's winter uniforms as bait. Meeting his gaze, I wrote, first, not 1 bolt of cotton or 1 chai of cloth from Qin Company's 4 proper warehouses entered this shipment. Second, I had shopkeeper Joe buy every transport firm in the southern city capable of carrying 3,000 winter uniforms. The wagons cannot leave the capital without passing through his hands. Third, military acceptance was scheduled for the 20th day of the 10th month. Today is only the 12th. The goods remain at Fengji compound in the southern city, awaiting the inspection official's signature. At last, Shi Linyuan sat upright. I continued, by ostentatiously sealing Qin warehouses tonight, your lordship has only warned the true owner of the goods to move the evidence. If you go to Fengji compound now, at most you will find a fire. The words, or to be exact, the final written character had barely landed when someone suddenly rushed in from outside. My lord, Fengji compound in the southern city is on fire, and every warehouse guard has disappeared. Shi Linyuan stared at me, his face as dark as the snowy night outside. I did not gloat. I merely wrote on the next sheet, now we can discuss cooperation. He said coldly, you are a suspect. You have no standing to negotiate with me. Then imprison me. 3 days from now, the black cotton will be moved into the Ministry of War's official warehouse. The true shipping order will be burned, and the inspector will approve false accounts. By then, your lordship will possess 1 false seal, 20 sample uniforms, and a Qin daughter who cannot speak the perfect person to confess. After reading it, Shi Linyuan suddenly pushed the interrogation lamp before me. Its flame illuminated an old scar across the web of his right hand and the rage he was straining to suppress in his eyes. During the Great Snow at the northern border 2 years ago, more than 800 men of the Northern Pacification Army froze to death. My elder brother, Shi Yunjung, died wearing clothing like this. He spoke 1 word at a time. If you dare use this matter to manipulate me, I will personally send you to the execution platform. I answered with my pen, my parents died in a carriage plunge 9 years ago, 1 month before the accident. My father was also investigating military cotton accounts. You want the true culprit, I want the old accounts. Neither of us needs speak of trust. We speak only of evidence. After reading, Shilin Yuan took the pen from my hand. From this moment you may return to the Qin residence, but you may not leave the capital, burn documents, or move the account books. Men from the Court of Judicial Review will follow you. What of Pei Xiaoye? Insufficient evidence. He will be released for now. I had expected it. Pei Xiaoye would never leave his own name on a false contract, while Ji Mingye would only claim to be an outsider who accepted gifts. It would have been far too cheap to condemn them with a single winter uniform. When I left the Court of Judicial Review at dawn, a crowd already surrounded the Qin residence. Workers from 9 banks, more than 20 suppliers, the Marquis's steward, and a crowd of creditors carrying promissory notes blocked the long street. Old Madame Pei sat in a soft sedan chair. When she saw me return, she struck her cane heavily against the ground. Qin Wangshu. Such audacity, she pointed at me and cursed. You and Xiaoyi divorced in a fit of temper, yet you dare suspend even the Marquis's ordinary household expenses. Last night, the bank refused to release money to buy coal. Are you trying to freeze your elders to death? I walked past her and ordered the Qin residence's main doors opened. Inside there was no tea table for guests, only 12 long desks. Every receipt the Marquis's estate had withdrawn from Qin Company was arranged by year. 30 accountants sat ready with their pens while a new plaque hung on the wall, Pei Family Debt Liquidation Office. The watching crowd erupted in commotion. I posted the official divorce agreement outside the gate, followed by a notice: from this day forward, every expense of the Pei household is severed from Qin Company. Anyone holding a promissory note personally signed by a Pei may register it here. Notes guaranteed only by Qin Company and lacking a Pei signature shall be separately reviewed. Seek repayment from whoever borrowed the money. The shopkeeper from Yongtai Bank rushed forward first. Madam Qin, young Master Pei borrowed 20,000 taels last month and mortgaged Qin Company's Eastern Market Silk House. Shopkeeper Zhou examined it in public and shook his head. The Silk House deed is numbered Chen 19. The document in your hand says Chen 90. The seal paste also contains indigo. It is a forged deed. The banker's face turned green, and he whirled on the Marquis's steward. You used a false deed to swindle money. At once, everyone else slapped their promissory notes onto the desks. Half the street became a debt collection ground in moments. The Marquis's steward had his cap torn off, while an enraged coal merchant even ripped open old Madame Pei's sedan curtain. She shook with fury. Rebellion. You ate the Pei family's food and lived under its roof. Without the Marquis's estate taking you in, you would have died 9 years ago. The Qin family's property naturally belongs under Pei management. I took the abacus from Kuei-Zhu and set it down heavily before her sedan. Reading from the general ledger, shopkeeper Zhou said, for 9 years, the Qin family paid the Marquis's estate 1,200 taels annually for Miss Qin's food, lodging and education, totaling 10,800 taels. It also paid old Madame Pei 27,000 taels as compensation for the hardship of caring for an orphan, excluding winter coal, bird's nest, and medicinal supplies. Miss Qin never consumed a single grain of Pei rice without payment. Instead, the Marquis's estate withdrew 146,000 taels in cash from her accounts. The crowd's whispers changed abruptly. Old Madame Pei's face turned from red to white. She forced herself to say, the accounts were made by your Qin family, so naturally you can write whatever you please. The trade seal is in Xiaoye's hands. He is the manager entrusted with Qin affairs. You mean this? Pei Xiaoye's voice came from behind the crowd. He had changed into a clean brocade robe, as though the previous night's disgrace had never happened. Ji Mingyue followed beside him in a veil, poison glinting in her eyes. Pei Xiaoye raised the green jade trade seal. Before everyone, he pressed it into vermilion paste and stamped a blank contract. The 2 characters Qin companies appeared clear and perfect, matching the trade guild's records in every detail. Wangshu, you know how to calculate a few ledgers. Do you truly believe that means you can control the Qin family? He looked at me, his voice almost gentle. Before your father's death, he entrusted the trade seal to my father and charged the Marquis's estate with caring for you and managing the Qin businesses. Without this seal, 48 branches will not recognize you. I had been waiting for him to display the seal in public. Kuei-zhu immediately opened the seal cancellation order issued by Qin headquarters to every branch on the 28th day of the 8th month. It bore the testimony of 3 trade guild leaders. The old seal was lost and invalid from that date. The new seal required dual verification, and no goods could be released without the proprietor's flourish. I wrote, "The object in your hand became a worthless stone half a month ago." The false seal on last night's military contract was also copied from it. The crowd erupted. At last, a crack appeared in Pei Xiaoyi's composure. He soon smiled again. "One cancellation order proves nothing. You call father's trusteeship false, but I have a witness." He stepped aside, and a grey-robed man in his 50s emerged from behind him. The instant I saw his face, my fingers clenched inside my sleeve. Zhao Cheng. He had been my father's most trusted chief shopkeeper, and the man who carried me from the mountain road after the carriage plunged 9 years ago. Following my parents' deaths, he guarded Qin Company and told me countless times that so long as the young mistress lived, the Qin family's sky could never fall. Zhao Cheng went to Pei Xiaoyi's side without looking at me. He knelt first before the Court of Judicial Review constables arriving at the scene. "This humble man is willing to testify that Miss Qin personally ordered the 3,000 winter uniforms on the 3rd day of the 9th month. He removed a ledger and a sheet covered with illustrated hand gestures from his robe. Miss Qin cannot speak and normally gives me instructions through gestures. This diagram records her hand order, while the account bears her personal flourish. Young Master Pei did not steal the old seal. Miss Qin deliberately gave it to him for safekeeping so that she could evade responsibility for the military supply crime. At some point, Xi Linyuan had appeared at the far end of the street. He accepted the ledger, turned to the final page, and looked up at me. The flourish on that page had indeed come from my hand, and the page stated clearly 3,000 jin of black cotton, personally inspected by Qin Wangshu. The ledger Zhao Cheng produced instantly turned the current of opinion in the street. Those who had surrounded the Marquise's steward to demand payment quietly retreated several steps. Some called it an internal Qin dispute. Others said I had known the winter uniforms were fraudulent all along, and had divorced Pei Xiaoyi only to make him bear the crime. Old Madame Pei sat straight once more, while Ji Mingye removed her veil and revealed a meaningful smile. Xi Linyuan closed the ledger. Qin Wangshu returned to the Court of Judicial Review with me. I did not move, I merely held out my hand to him. "You still wish to examine it?" he asked. I nodded. Zhao Cheng finally looked up and advised me, as he had when teaching me to read accounts. "Young mistress, stop resisting. The Pei household has treated you well, and the young master only wished to suppress the matter. Admit to a moment's foolishness, and the Marquise's estate will plead for mercy on your behalf." Looking at him, I wrote, "When you carried me down the mountain 9 years ago, the axle cut your right leg, and it aches whenever the weather is wet. Every year I had the pharmacy deliver salve. Did you receive it?" The corner of Zhao Cheng's eye twitched. "I did last year. When your grandson caught the pox, I summoned an imperial physician to save him." "Yes, therefore you believe I will not expose you in public." His lips moved, but no words emerged. I accepted the ledger. Instead of first examining the flourish, I pulled out the blue thread sewn into the spine. The cord was thick and dyed the dark blue normally used for Qin ledgers. It appeared entirely unremarkable. I had Kuei-zhu bring a white porcelain dish, placed the thread inside, and borrowed lamp oil from a fan tower servant. Pei Xiaoyi frowned. "What can one piece of worthless thread prove?" The fire touched it. The blue cord curled rapidly, releasing acrid black smoke before burning into a hard lump of ash. I retrieved the genuine 9th month account from inside the Qin residence, and likewise removed a piece of its spine thread. When the second thread burned, the outer blue color faded, revealing a golden glimmer inside so fine that it was nearly invisible. Once the flame went out, only loose white ash and a bead of gold the size of a grain tip remained in the dish. Shopkeeper Joe explained to the crowd, "For 18 years, Qin ledgers have used custom gold cord binding thread from Golden Silk Workshop. The strand of gold is not for extravagance, but to prevent pages from being removed and replaced. Each year uses a different thickness and dye, and only the proprietor holds the formula." I pushed both dishes before Xi Linyuan. The paper and cover of Zhao Cheng's ledger are genuine, but the binding thread is false. Someone opened an old account, moved the final page bearing my flourish into a new ledger, then rebound it with ordinary blue cord. Xilin Yuan reopened the ledger and counted each page along the spine. At page 23, he stopped. The 22 pages before and after it bore double holes left by old gold thread. That page alone had single holes. The supposed 3,000 jin of black cotton was written on the single-holed page. My flourish appeared on the next sheet. Because the pages lay close, they appeared at first glance to belong to the same transaction. Xilin Yuan ordered clean water and gently brushed the paper. Beneath the ink, scraped away marks gradually emerged. The page had originally recorded the 300 jin of medicinal cotton I donated to the epidemic ward the previous year. The 3,000 jin of black cotton was created merely by adding ink to the character for medicine and inserting the character for 1,000 into 300. Once the onlookers understood, curses immediately poured down upon Zhao Cheng. He turned to run, but court constables had already blocked the way. Pei Xiaoye continued holding out. False binding still cannot prove. Wang Shu issued no hand order. Shopkeeper Zhao served her for years and understands her gestures best. Quite right, Xilin Yuan passed the gesture diagram to Zhao Cheng. Since you claim Madam Qin personally instructed you, repeat her hand order before everyone now. Zhao Cheng raised both hands, first signaling 3, then making a downward fist, and finally drawing a circle in his palm with 2 fingers. After watching, I lifted my chin toward Kuizhu. Kuizhu had held herself back for a long time. Now she finally sneered. Shopkeeper Zhao, you followed my lady for 9 years. Yet you do not even know that she never transmits account orders through gestures. Qin item numbers can exceed 10 characters, and color, dimensions, and delivery dates cannot contain a single error. Every order my lady issues is preserved in her own writing. She uses gestures only for small things, such as asking me to add tea or open a window. I raised my right hand and made the exact same gesture as Zhao Cheng. Kuizhu said, "It means 3 bowls of wontons without scallions. My lady used it once at a street corner wonton stall when she was 12. Shopkeeper Zhao must have seen it from a distance and remembered it until today." Laughter burst along the street. Zhao Cheng's face turned utterly grey. Xilin Yuan did not laugh. He searched Zhao Cheng's sleeve and found a Yongtai banknote for 5,000 taels, redeemed the day before and signed by an outer courtyard manager from the Pei household. Zhao Cheng dropped to his knees. "My lord, this humble man only acted for the master's household. Young Master Pei said Miss Qin had married into the Pei family, so Qin accounts were Pei accounts. He ordered me to change the page and the gesture diagram was also his." Pei Xiaoye cut him off harshly. "Do you accuse whoever paid you? They have my grandson." Zhao Cheng suddenly broke down and shuffled forward on his knees to seize my skirt. "Young mistress, the Pei family took my daughter-in-law and grandson to a country estate. They said that if I did not obey, they would infect the child with disease and let him die outside. This humble man dared not refuse. I stepped backward and did not allow him to touch me. Perhaps he had been coerced, but the moment he opened the ledger and sent me toward the execution platform, 9 years of past kindness had been settled. Yet his confession could open the gates of the Pei family's country estate for me, and I would not waste it. I wrote, address. Zhao Cheng immediately named Green Parasol Manor west of the city. Xilin Yuan dispatched 6 constables to rescue the hostages and ordered Zhao Cheng escorted to the court. Seeing the situation turn, Pei Xiaoye turned to leave, but I raised an arm to block his path. He lowered his voice. "1 binding thread. Do you believe that means you want? At least today I am not the one entering the prison cart." He looked at the line and suddenly smiled. "Wang Shu, after all these years beside me, how do you still see only what lies before your eyes? Qin Company does not belong to you merely because you possess a few genuine ledgers and change 1 seal. After your parents died, the Marquis's estate preserved the businesses for you. Without the Pei family's property trust document, you cannot even hold the proprietor's seat." My heart sank. I was 12 when my parents died, and my maternal relatives lived far away in Lingnan. My father's old friend Marquis Pei had indeed cared for me temporarily, but once I married at 18, Qin Company should have been fully returned. The Pei family continually delayed, and I assumed they were reluctant to give up the flow of money. I had never seen any supposed property trust document. Old Madame Pei removed a red sandalwood case from her sedan and handed it to the arriving capital prefecture officials. Inside lay an official contract from 9 years earlier. The paper had yellowed, and its seams bore the capital prefecture's old seal, the trade guild's seal, and my mother's private seal. Its terms were clear. Should the Qin couple suffer misfortune, their only daughter, Wang Shu, unable to speak or care for herself because of a heart ailment, shall entrust all firms and landed property in her name to the Xuanping Marquise's estate. Regardless of marriage, it may not be reclaimed without Pei approval. At the bottom were both my parents' signatures. The capital prefecture official examined it 3 times, his expression grave. The paper, ink, and seals are genuine, and the archive number also matches. Old Madame Pei stared at me and finally smiled with certain victory. A mad, mute woman who cannot even speak dreams of owning 48 branches. From this day forward, the Qin residence, Qing Company, and all money in your name shall remain under the Marquise's management. I looked at Shi Linyuan. He did not speak for me. He merely ordered the trust document sealed into an evidence bag. The document's authenticity will be investigated separately until the result is known. The Qin family's large assets are temporarily frozen, and no one may access them. Pei Shoye drew close and spoke so only I could hear. What difference does leaving the Marquise's estate make? Your people, your money, and your name will ultimately return to my hands. Looking at my mother's seal on the contract, I suddenly noticed a tiny piece missing from the phoenix tail. That was not where. My mother had a habit when applying her seal. On any property contract left for me, she placed a grain of silver powder inside a needle-tip-sized notch on the phoenix tail. The tail before me had the notch but no silver powder. The seal was genuine, but it had not been applied for this document. Some unknown had acquired blank official paper bearing my mother's seal and added the trust terms after her death. The problem was that only someone who had entered the Qin family's inner archive before my parents' accident could have obtained such paper. On the second day after the Pei family produced the official property trust contract, the capital prefecture sent men to seal Qin headquarters accounting rooms. The 48 branches dared not follow my instructions. Banks froze the vaults, and someone even measured the plaque over the Qin residence gate, preparing to replace it with managed by the Pei family. Old Madame Pei seized the opportunity to petition the imperial clan court, claiming that I had suffered from a heart ailment since childhood and had become irrational after the shock of divorce. She asked that the Marquise's estate take me in again and dispose of my property on my behalf. She wanted more than money. If the authorities ruled me unable to care for myself, every character I wrote and every person I accused could be dismissed as madness. I would still be the easiest person to blame in the military supply case. On the third day, the Capital Trade Guild held the winter relief cloth auction. It was normally a business transaction among merchants, but the Pei family invited capital prefecture officials, an imperial clan court registrar, and more than a dozen noblewomen to prove publicly that I lacked the ability to manage a household. Pei Shoye stopped me at the guild hall entrance. It is not too late to come back with me. I can tell the imperial clan court you were merely acting petulantly and that your heart ailment has not worsened. I moved his hand from the carriage shaft and passed him a paper. Step aside, you are blocking me from making money. His face darkened. Qin Company's vaults are frozen, and no supplier will extend you so much as a single thread. With what will you bid? The guild hall soon gave him his answer. This winter relief project required 20,000 thin quilts for the poor outside the capital. The official price was low and the deadline only 20 days. Large firms disliked the narrow profit, while small workshops could not handle the volume. In previous years, Qing Company led the work and divided production among other firms. With Qing Company now frozen, Pei Shayi submitted a bid of 90,000 taels in the name of Pei Management of Qin Company. The price was 20% higher than in previous years. He had bought the cooperation of 7 cotton guilds in advance and believed no one could compete. When my turn came, every eye in the room settled upon me. The imperial clan court registrar asked deliberately, Madame Qin cannot speak. How will she name a price? I had Kuiju open a wooden placard bearing only one figure, 64,000 taels. The guild hall exploded. Pei Xiaoye laughed aloud. Wang Shu business is not a childish quarrel. 64,000 taels cannot even buy new cotton. Do you also mean to stuff the quilts with shroud filling? I turned over another placard. Do not purchase new cotton. Use short fiber from household stocks, mill sweeping, and qualified remnants from previous years. Unpick, wash, sun, and card everything to one standard. Reduce each quilt's weight by 20%, but add a coarse cloth inner liner without diminishing warmth. Materials supplied by 1937 weaving households. Wages settled on delivery. The trade guild leader frowned. 137 weaving households. They possess neither firms nor guarantors. Who dares promise they will deliver within 20 days? The side door opened, and dozens of women carried 10 sample quilts inside. Some were widows, some embroiderers repudiated by their husbands, and others workers denied wages after their mills failed. Every quilt corner bore a name, date, and batch. One was cut open to reveal a clean lining and even stitches, while its weight matched to the smallest measure. Their leader, Maggie Liu, said, "Proprietor Qin gave us measurements and procedures 7 days ago. Teams of 3 inspect one another while unpicking and washing, carding cotton, and sewing. If one quilt is defective, the entire team remakes it. If we deliver on time, each woman earns 20% more. We have already produced 500 quilts without touching one coin from Qin Company's vaults." Pei Xiaoye turned sharply toward me. 7 days earlier had been the day before he produced the divorce agreement. I had begun preparing to leave him then. It had never been the sudden fit of temper he imagined. I handed another ledger to the guild. The households contributed materials as shares in kind. The government would pay a 30% deposit to purchase coarse cloth and settle the balance after inspection. Qin Company would collect only a 10% coordination fee. While the weaving women profited by the peace, 64,000 taels was not only sufficient, it would place cash in the hands of 1937 families before winter. The officials responsible for winter relief inspected the sample quilts on the spot. They soaked them, dried them in strong sun, then cut open 3 random pieces. Not one contained black cotton. The sample quilts submitted by the Pei family, however, weighed half a jin too little. When opened, small sandbags used to falsify the weight were tucked into the corners. Boos erupted through the crowd. Pei Xiaoye glared at the manager behind him. The man dropped to his knees in fright. "Young master, the workshop was introduced by Miss Ji." This humble man did not know they had cut corners. Seated among the women, Ji Mingyue said coldly, "Yesterday, young Master Pei said every decision was yours. Today, when something goes wrong, you blame a woman." The first public crack split open between them. The trade guild ultimately awarded me the winter relief contract. Yet the Imperial Clan Court Registrar refused to yield. Completing one transaction proves only that Madame Qin understands accounts, not that her heart ailment has healed. The property trust contract is written clearly in black and white. The Marquise's estate still possesses management authority. I had long known they would say this. Kuiju ordered the guild hall doors opened. Outside stood not spectators, but 326 creditors carrying promissory notes, shipping orders, and IOS. From elderly coal sellers to money-lending bankers, they filled the entire street. I posted the Marquise's 9-year expense summary across the guild hall's main wall, writing the corresponding receipt number beside every entry. The 146,000 taels excluded the 78,000 Pei Xiaoye had taken during the past 6 months, as well as money old Madame Pei collected in the name of caring for me. If the Pei family possesses management authority, then it must also assume debts incurred in Qin Company's name during its management, shopkeeper Zhou declared. "We did not invite you here today to demand money from proprietor Qin, but to have the Pei family acknowledge, one by one, the silver it swindled by falsely using Qin Company's name." More than 300 people raised their notes together. "Pei family, repay your debts. You have delayed the coal money supporting my family of 10 for 3 months. You swindled 20,000 taels from me with a false shop deed. If you give no answer today, I will strike the petitioner's drum." The roar made the guild hall's paper windows tremble. Old Madame Pei, originally seated at the head to observe the proceeding, found even the rear exit blocked. Pei Shoye tried to order his guards to clear a path, but Xi Linyuan and the court constables took position at the entrance, and no one dared draw a blade. He still did not speak a word for me. He merely asked the capital prefecture official, if a trustee receives the profits, must that trustee also repay debts from the management period? Cold sweat covered the official's forehead. Under the law. Yes. I seized the moment and presented 3 choices. The Pei family could admit that the property trust contract was invalid and restore Qin Company to my management. It could affirm the contract and immediately assume debts totaling 224,000 taels. Or, if it accepted neither, the capital prefecture could seal every Pei and Qin asset and audit each entry. The instant old Madame Pei saw the debt total, the prayer beads in her hand snapped. Pei Shoye gritted his teeth. You do not decide whether the official contract is valid. We accept the audit. It was his only way to delay and the path I had chosen for him. Once officials audited the accounts, they could lawfully enter the Pei family's inner vault. What he had hidden for 9 years would finally see daylight. On the afternoon the audit began. A retired trade guild recorder came to the Qin residence. The old man's surname was Yan. 9 years earlier he had registered my parents' property trust agreement. He brought a rubbing as thin as a cicada's wing, its edges eaten by insects. Master Qin did establish a trust, but the original text stated only that the property would be managed until the young mistress turned 18, and that every large transaction required signatures from both the Qin and Pei families. Recorder Yan said. Letter, the Trade Guild archive burned, destroying the filed original. This old man found it suspicious and privately preserved an embossed rubbing. I overlaid the rubbing and the Pei family's official agreement against the window. The seals and signatures occupied identical positions, but the words differed. The Pei family truly held official paper my parents had once sealed, but they had washed away the original terms and rewritten them as regardless of marriage it may not be reclaimed. Recorder Yan pointed to a nearly invisible line at the bottom of the rubbing. When Master Qin registered it, he specially added one sentence, should husband and wife suffer an accident together. Retrieve the ledger in Cabinet Jar 7 of the Northern Warehouse and submit it to the Court of Judicial Review for examination. I immediately sent shopkeeper Joe to investigate the Northern Warehouse. Half an hour later, he returned bloodless. Proprietor, the Northern Warehouse was transferred to the Pei family 9 years ago. Cabinet Jar 7 did not list a ledger, but a batch of iron carriage components. On the 3rd day after your parents' accident, Marquis personally collected them. Zhao Cheng signed as recipient. The carriage that plunged from the cliff 9 years earlier had broken its axle. And before the accident occurred, the Pei family had already known where father hid the evidence. Less than an hour after Recorder Yan left the Qin residence, word came that the Northern Warehouse was on fire. The flames began in Warehouse Jia. By the time I arrived, half the roof had collapsed. The Pei-appointed warehouse manager stood outside wailing that the building held nothing but rotten timber and scrap iron left from 9 years ago, and the fire was too fierce to save them. Instead of ordering water, I had shopkeeper Joe and the workers tear down the eastern wall. The manager blocked their way. Madam Qin, this warehouse is managed by the Pei family. The official audit is not complete, and you have no right to trespass. I slapped the winter relief contract against his chest and pointed to the neighboring warehouse door. 5,000 newly delivered bolts of disaster relief coarse cloth were stored on the Northern Warehouse's eastern side. If they caught fire, the trustee would pay the loss. The manager's face changed abruptly when he saw the value, and he dared not obstruct us again. Only after the eastern wall came down did everyone discover that the fire was small. Wet straw and grease had created the thick smoke, while only a row of empty wooden shelves burned. The true old Jia warehouse had long since been sealed behind the western wall with blue bricks, and the fresh mortar around its door was still damp. Xi Linyuan brought men to break through the wall and found 4 iron chests in the hidden room. 3 contained rusted axles, wheel hubs, and axle pins. The final chest was empty, though several charred account pages lay at its bottom. The Pei manager's legs gave way on the spot. Why was a wall built only last night around scrap iron from 9 years ago? Xi Linyuan asked. The manager insisted he knew nothing and claimed old madam had ordered it protected from damp. Shi Linyuan had the iron part numbers copied, then lifted an axle for close examination. The Qin Ironworks mark was engraved on its shaft, while a neat semicircle of file marks surrounded the joint. I recognized the number. Before my parents' accident, Qin Company supplied 200 axle sets to the Northwestern Army. Father discovered that one batch of pig iron was mixed with slag and could not bear sufficient weight, so he recalled every piece, locked them in the northern warehouse, and prepared to investigate the foundry. The defective iron should have been melted down, but someone secretly installed it on my parents' carriage. Shi Linyuan wrapped the axle in cloth and passed it to the coroner. Determine the age of the file marks and whether the break was made by cold chiseling. I wrote, the empty chest is missing one set. Perhaps it has already been used. Number my parents' carriage fell into a deep ravine and the county office recovered the wreckage. It could not have returned to the northern warehouse. Someone removed the missing set last night. Shi Linyuan surveyed the room. Few people knew Recorder Yan visited the Qin residence and could move the iron parts within an hour. Very few indeed. I did not return home. Instead, I hung a notice at the northern warehouse gate. Old property will be inventoried in 3 days. Every carriage component from 9 years ago shall be submitted to the Court of Judicial Review for re-examination. Qin Company offers 10,000 taels for the missing axle from cabinet GR7. With no questions asked, after reading the notice, Shi Linyuan asked, disturbing the grass to startle the snake. I wrote, if the snake does not move, how will we find its hole? You have placed yourself at the hole's entrance. Are you not afraid it will bite you first? Your lordship sealed 4 of my warehouses and questioned me through the night. It is rather late to ask whether I am afraid. He studied my words. The corner of his mouth seemed to move, but in the end he said coldly, the court will place guards around the northern warehouse. For 3 days you are forbidden to come alone. I nodded. At the second watch that night, I sat alone inside the northern warehouse accounting room. Of course, I was not truly alone. 20 Qin guards hid beneath the coarse cloth. Archers hired by shopkeeper Joe lay in wait on the roof. Every water jar had been filled with fine sand, while 3 layers of wet felt wrapped the beams. Kueju disguised herself as me and departed the Qin residence's main gate in a carriage bound for the Shi residence. Every watcher in the city believed I had gone to ask Shi Linyuan for protection. Shortly after the 3rd watch, a catcall sounded outside the western wall. The night guard opened the side gate and 6 unlit mule carts entered in single file. They carried wine jars, but sulfur for kindling lined each jar's bottom. Their masked leader wore a Marquis's guard token at his waist. They did not set the fire immediately, but went straight to the hidden warehouse. One pried open the 4th empty chest and cursed beneath his breath. The item truly is not here. The heir said the old man would hide the evidence at the chest's bottom, dig up the ground if necessary. Another said, burn it first. Once the fire begins, Qin Wangshu will surely come. Shi Linyuan's men guard the eastern gate, so we will seize her through the west. The heir wants only her hand and the new seal. At those words, I opened the accounting room door. Lanterns lit one after another, turning the courtyard bright as day. The 6 arsonists found themselves surrounded, with the western gate already chained shut. They froze for an instant, drew their blades, and charged. I did not retreat. Instead, I lifted the accounting table before me, revealing a thin iron shield nailed beneath its top. The first crossbow bolt struck the shield, sparks grazing my sleeve. The rooftop archers fired at once and pierced 3 men's calves. The others hurled wine jars at the coarse cloth, and sulfur exploded into flame. At shopkeeper Joe's order, the workers hidden behind the cloth flung fine sand. The tongues of fire barely reached the wet felt before they were smothered, leaving only choking white smoke throughout the courtyard. Seeing no escape, the leader suddenly drew an iron tube, aimed at the hidden warehouse corner, and triggered its mechanism. I had noticed the object in his sleeve and hurled an inkstone. The tube shifted half a chi, and a fire buried itself in the floor tile. A hollow sound came from beneath. They pried up the tiles to reveal a crawl space wide enough for 1 person. At its end lay an oilcloth bundle containing the missing axle and half a surviving warehouse issue ledger. The leader clearly had not known it was there. Startled, he blurted, The air clearly said Zhao Cheng already removed it. Shopkeeper Joe immediately pinned him down. I picked up the issue ledger. In the 8th month 9 years ago, 2 sets of defective axles left cabinet jar 7. Zhao Cheng was listed as recipient for one. The other bore only the character Pei. My parents' carriage fell on the 19th day of the 8th month. That night, we not only captured the arsonists, but made them dig out the evidence with their own hands. Yet I had no time to breathe in relief. A rain of arrows suddenly flew from beyond the wall. They were aimed not at me, but at the 6 captured men. 3 suspects were struck dead at once, and an arrow pierced the leader's shoulder. Our rooftop archers gave chase, only to see a squad of court constables close in from the alley and trap the hidden archers inside a dead end. Shi Linyuan emerged from the smoke, his expression exceptionally ugly. I said you were forbidden to come alone. I pointed to the 20 guards in the courtyard. You call that not alone? I had angered him into laughter. The enemy brought military crossbows, 2 kun higher, and your accounting table would not have stopped the bolt. I wrote, if your lordship already knew there would be a second group, why did you not tell me? He fell silent. The men who fired had been highly trained, and the court had happened to block every retreat in advance. They had not arrived at the last moment. Shi Linyuan had already followed the military crossbows to another group sent to silence witnesses. He allowed me to lay my trap in the warehouse, so those in the shadows would believe the court guarded only the eastern gate, enabling him to capture them all. We had each used the other as bait. The difference was that I wrote my plan into our terms of cooperation. He had not. Had I told you, would you still have sat here? He asked. I wrote, yes, but I would have armored the guards and would not have let 3 living suspects die before your eyes. Shi Linyuan looked at the bodies on the ground and offered no defense. I folded the paper in half and wrote on the reverse, our cooperation ends here. The axle and issue ledger belong to the court. I will investigate the Qin accounts myself. He reached to accept the paper, but I released it and let it fall into the still-burning brazier. Its corners quickly curled into ash. I turned and left the northern warehouse. At the gate, Shi Linyuan suddenly said, Qin Wangshu, when I investigate a military supply case, I will never place anyone's safety above the truth, including my own. I did not look back. I merely had Kueju leave him 1 sentence. That is Lord Shi's choice, not a reason to make mine for me. Early the next morning, an unmarked carriage stopped at the rear gate of the Qin residence. Ji Mingye descended alone in a black cloak. She removed her veil, revealing a fresh palm mark across her right cheek and a split lip, though she clutched half a ledger tightly in her hands. Qin Wangshu, I know where the 3,000 winter uniforms truly went. She looked at me. Your father wrote this half-ledger himself before he died. Keep me alive and get me out of the capital, and I will tell you everything the Pei family did 9 years ago. I did not invite her inside. I wrote against the door panel, if you want to live, first return everything you owe me. Ji Mingyu apparently had not expected my first response to father's ledger to be summoning the shopkeepers of 3 silver shops instead of snatching it away. They carried the recovery list from that night at Fan Tower and inventoried every object on her body. Her cloak had snow fox lining from Qin Silk House. Red jade from Qin Jewel House adorned her belt. Even the red sandalwood case holding the ledger had been taken by Pei Xiaoye from my mother's dressing chest. Ji Mingyue pressed the case against her breast. Are you not afraid I will tear up the ledger? I wrote, if you could bear to do so, you would have burned it last night instead of bringing it through the snow. She stared at me for a long moment, then suddenly laughed. Pei Xiaoye said you were timid and slow, unable to do anything but keep accounts. His judgment of people is evidently as poor as his business sense. Enough flattery. Where did the ledger come from? My father left it. Ji Mingyue's true name was Ji Mingyue, and her father, Ji Chang, had once been the Northwest's greatest cotton merchant 9 years ago. The defective axles and inferior cotton had officially been supplied by the Ji family. After the military supply case came to light, Ji Chang was sentenced to beheading. The family's assets were confiscated, and she was sold into the music bureau. I always believed your father blamed the Jai family to escape his own crimes, she said. 3 years ago, Pei Xiaoye recognized me at Fan Tower. He told me the Qin family had swallowed the Ji trade routes, and promised to clear father's name if I helped him obtain the Qin trade seal. I approached him not because I loved him, but to recover what belonged to the Jai family. I wrote, so you filled 3,000 winter uniforms with old stuffing from the epidemic ward. Her smile faded. That was the pay workshop. I only found the freight boats and buyers. If you do not loose the arrow yourself, does guiding the murderer mean you killed no one? If you wanted to hear a sage's sermon, why meet me? She slapped the half-ledger onto the doorstep. I help you investigate your parents' deaths, and you keep me out of Pei Shoye's hands. A fair exchange. I had Kuiju pass her a list. It named 3 residences, 7 shops, jewelry, banknotes, and 4 tin warehouses she had mortgaged with forged deeds, totaling 93,000 taels. She had taken all of them from Qin Company through Pei Shoye. Return everything within 3 days. If one item is missing, I will send you to the capital prefecture. Once you repay it all, I can guarantee the Pei family will not silence you before you testify at the court, but I will not absolve your crimes. Ji Mingyue gritted her teeth. The 3 residences and shops are already mortgaged. They will be auctioned at Yongfeng Exchange at noon today. With what can I return them? I wrote, that is your problem. She stood in the snow clutching the ledger, her expression shifting several times. At last, she asked, what do you want me to do? Only then did I invite her inside. At noon, Yongfeng Exchange was packed so tightly that no water could pass. Desperate for money to cover its debts, the Pei family bundled the 3 residences and 7 shops in Ji Mingyue's name for auction at a reserve price of 50,000 taels. Every buyer knew the properties were disputed by the Qin family and dared not bid highly. Pei Shoye arranged 4 shill bidders to raise the price in turn, hoping to convert a false sale into a real transfer. Ji Mingyue still wore red and sat on the 2nd floor beneath a veiled hat. She publicly announced her break with Pei Shoye and claimed she would sell her capital properties and return south, attracting many wealthy merchants eager for bargains. When bidding reached 60,000 taels, I had shopkeeper Joe raise his placard for the first time. Sitting opposite, Pei Shoye sneered and increased it to 70,000. I followed to 80,000. The onlookers whispered that I had lost my reason in my desperation to recover my parents' old property. The residences and shops had a market value of only 75,000 taels and carried mortgages besides. Any higher bid would mean a loss. As expected, Pei Shoye raised it to 90,000 and deliberately lifted his chin at me. Wangshu, did you not swear to recover every brick and tile of the Qin family, 91,000 taels, and I will let you have them? I shook my head and raised no further bid. The auction hammer fell. The buyer was Tongda Trading House, arranged by Pei Shoye. Its beaming shopkeeper stepped forward to execute the transfer, but Ji Mingyue rose at that moment. Before money and property change hands, I must explain one matter. She removed her veiled hat and raised 7 property deeds. These assets have already been mortgaged to Yongtai, Hengchang, and Rufeng banks for a total of 120,000 taels. Since Tongda Trading House purchased the properties, please assume the debts as well. The smile vanished from the Tongda shopkeeper's face. That was not written in the auction catalogue. Young Master Pei drafted the catalogue. I gave him the mortgage documents long ago. Ji Mingyue looked at Pei Xiaoye. Xiaoye, you have not forgotten, have you? Pei Xiaoye shot to his feet. Those mortgages are false. The shopkeepers of all 3 banks entered together and placed notes bearing his own signature and the old trade seal on the table. He had personally collected the money, 120,000 taels in total. 65,000 were the unexplained funds I first identified, while another 55,000 entered the Southern City workshop. Tongda Trading House was a payfront and could not possibly repay 120,000 taels. The 3 banks immediately applied to seize its warehouses, cart fleet, and cash. Pei Shoye had intended to sell from his left hand to his right and extract 90,000 taels. Instead, the creditors cut off his right hand as well. At last he understood and turned toward me. You purchased these debts. I did not deny it after signing the winter relief contract. I used the government's 30% deposit as security to purchase every matured pay debt from the 3 banks. Afraid that the forged agreements would become worthless, the bank sold me 120,000 taels of debt for only 78,000. no matter who bought at today's auction. I held the deck. If Pei Xiaoyi used a shill to assume the purchase, I would seize the shill's property as well. The director of Yongfeng Exchange cancelled the transaction on the spot because the seller had concealed the mortgages. The 10,000 tael auction deposit was forfeited and paid first to the creditor. As agreed, Ji Mingyue handed me the residence deeds, shop deeds and remaining banknotes. Before everyone's eyes, she pulled the last golden hairpin from her head and placed it on the tray, then mocked him. Pei Xiaoye, you always said you could give me a good life without Qin money. Now I have returned everything you gave me. Show me one gift that truly belongs to you. Standing before an empty seat, Pei Xiaoye found that the most valuable thing remaining on his body was the brocade robe permitted only to the heir of a marquis. He raised a hand to strike Ji Mingyue, but my female guards restrained him. Ji Mingyue leaned close and whispered one sentence in his ear. His face instantly turned white, and he stopped struggling. On the road back to the Qin residence, I asked what she had said. I told him the real goods were never at Fengji compound. Ji Mingyue handed me the half-ledger left by her father. It recorded Marquis's purchase of scrap iron and black cotton in the Ji family's name 9 years ago. After Father Qin discovered the truth and prepared to report it, Ji Chang wrote on the final page, the Pei family exchanged the goods. Brother Qin, flee at once. The two families had not been enemies. They were witnesses silenced together. The final pages also contained this year's river shipping schedule. The 3,000 uniforms at Fengji compound were merely samples displayed for the Court of Judicial Review, Ji Mingyue said. The true uniforms were loaded onto boats on the 27th day of the 9th month and sent down Tongji River under the name of famine relief grain. The carts and roads were a distraction. In 5 days, the boats will reach the northern transshipment dock. I rapidly turned to the shipment numbers. 3,000 uniforms were only the first batch, with another 7,000 behind them. Total inspection payment was 480,000 taels. Once the first batch entered the military warehouse, the Pei family could use the advance payment to fill its debts and deliver the second batch in Qing Company's name. Why speak only now? I wrote. Because the boats carry more than winter uniforms, Ji Mingyue said. They also hold 20 chests of military crossbow mechanisms. The Pei family is not selling rotten cotton. It is selling the Frontier Guard rotation schedule and weapons. Hoofbeats sounded outside the courtyard gate. Shi Linyuan dismounted, with court constables behind him already prepared to depart. He had clearly learned of the river route from the prisoners as well, only half an hour later than I had. He came to the steps without mentioning the night at the northern warehouse or asking to restore our cooperation. He merely handed me a travel warrant. The Qin family owns 6 docks and 27 cargo boats on Tongji River. I need your waterway chart. I accepted the warrant and wrote on its reverse, agreed I command the boats, and the men follow my arrangements. Once the goods are found, I inspect the Qin ledgers first. The court may not seize the only original. After reading it, Shi Linyuan said, you still do not trust me. Your lordship never trusted me either. Good, we can dispense with courtesy. He put away the paper. We depart at the hour of the tiger tomorrow, behind us. Ji Mingyue added, that is too late. Pei Xiaoyi released a carrier pigeon just now. Once the men aboard receive the message, they will scuttle the boat and destroy the goods ahead of schedule. I looked up at the sky. Only an hour of daylight remained, while even with a favorable wind, reaching the nearest interception point required a full night's travel. 1 hour is enough. After writing, I ordered shopkeeper Joe to open the signal lamp chart for Qin Company's 6 docks. The Pei cargo boat would travel north along Tongji River and encounter 2 routes after Bluestone Gorge. The eastern channel ran fast and was dangerous with reefs at night. The western channel was calmer but passed Qin Company's Reed Bay dock. Ordinary vessels chose the east because the embankment at Reed Bay was under repair, yet Ji Mingyue knew the agreed signal among the escort men. 3 red lamps and 2 white men officials were inspecting contraband along the eastern channel, and every boat must divert through Reed Bay. We did not need to catch that boat. We only needed to make it turn into our net. The 6 fastest river couriers departed first with the lamp signals. Shopkeeper Joe mobilized 8 light craft from the Qin docks, removed their cargo compartments and rigged double sails. Shi Linyuan ordered the constables out of their uniforms. They carried only short blades and chains and lit no torches. Ji Mingyue boarded as well. Shi Linyuan glanced at her. A suspect should not accompany us. She gripped the gunwale and sneered. Without me, you will not even understand the escort's coded phrases. If Lord Shi fears I will escape, fasten your chain to your own wrist. Shi Linyuan truly produced a fine chain, fastened one end to her, and secured the other to an iron ring in the cabin. There is no need to fasten it to me. If you jump into the river, the iron ring is more reliable. Ji Mingyue was rendered speechless. Dusk had fallen when our boats left the dock. A northern wind pressed against the bows, making the twin sails crack loudly. Unlike that night at the northern warehouse, Shi Linyuan made no separate arrangements. He wrote the deployment of 12 constables and 2 archers on paper and handed it entirely to me. You know the waterways, you choose where we approach. He said, the court is responsible only for taking prisoners. It was an apology and a concession. I accepted the paper but did not say I forgave him. At the 3rd quarter of the hour of the dog, the 5 agreed lamps appeared on the river ahead. The cargo boat at the eastern channel entrance slowed as expected. Someone at the bow reflected a bronze mirror twice, then turned toward Reed Bay. All light boats silently closed in along the reed beds. It was a 3-deck cargo vessel sitting deep in the water, though a famine relief grain banner hung from its side. Grain sacks filled the deck and felt solid to the touch. Had Ji Mingyue not recognized the black cord at the helmsman's waist, anyone would have mistaken it for an official grain vessel. The escort leader had barely entered Reed Bay when he noticed that the lamps on shore were wrongly placed. 3 red and 2 white should be at the embankment entrance. Why are they hanging from the willow? He shouted. A trap. Turn the helm. The large vessel swung violently broadside, raising a wave half a man's height. It knocked away our foremost light boat, throwing 2 constables into the water. More than a dozen crossbow-bearing guards rose simultaneously from behind the grain sacks and fired wildly into the reeds. Shi Linyuan drew his blade and moved forward, but I caught his hand and pointed toward the cargo boat's stern. To defend against river bandits, Qin cargo boats kept a broken cable hook beside the helm. If it caught the auxiliary rudder line at the stern, the large vessel could only turn in circles. I had 2 light craft draw the crossbow fire head-on while shopkeeper Joe and I approached the stern. Arrows passed my ears and struck the water. Shopkeeper Joe cast the iron hook. The first throw caught only the railing, and a man cut it free. On the second, I personally hurled the hook through the auxiliary rudder opening. The rope went taut at once and dragged our lightboat nearly upright. Release the line, Shi Linyuan shouted from another boat. I did not if our lightboat overturned. The hook would come loose. I sent everyone to the stern, took a short axe and cut through the locking pins in the front half of our craft. Qin Swift boats were designed to separate. The cargo boat dragged the bow into the waves while the rear section swung sideways under the force. The iron cable wrapped perfectly around a stone pillar in midstream. The cargo vessel's auxiliary rudder locked, and the ship crashed heavily onto the shoal. Only then did Shi Linyuan lead his men aboard. Unable to escape, the escort leader swung his blade toward an oil barrel beneath the mast. Ji Mingyue suddenly screamed from the lower cabin. That is not oil for burning the boat, it contains fire caltrops. There was no time to write. For the first time, I forced one short word from my throat. Back. The sound was hoarse, like sandpaper against wood. Yet it made Shi Linyuan, closest to me, turn sharply. He paused for only an instant before kicking over the brazier beside the barrel. Sparks struck the deck. What rolled from the barrel was not oil, but black iron spheres wrapped in hemp cord. If ignited, the entire boat and every piece of evidence would be blown apart. Court constables smothered the iron balls with wet grain sacks. The escort leader tried to leap into the river, but was netted by the light craft I had stationed downstream. In the hidden compartment, 3,000 winter uniforms were stacked neatly beneath the grain sacks. Everyone bore a Qin cargo mark, but inside was black cotton. The gold thread in the marks was genuine, proving that an insider at Qin Company was still delivering new inspection labels to the Pei family. Shi Linyuan asked the escort leader where the 20 chests of military crossbow mechanisms had gone. At first, the man refused to answer. Ji Mingyue crouched before him and named the street where his elderly mother and 2 children lived. Once Pei Shaoyi learns you were captured, he will not kill you first. He will kill the family that knows for whom you escorted the boat. You protect his secret. He exterminates your family. Does that bargain seem worthwhile? At last, the escort leader spoke. The mechanisms were unloaded at the southern ferry yesterday and packed into gift chests for the old madam of Xuanping Marquise's estate. Her birthday banquet is tomorrow with many guests. The chests will leave the city among the various family convoys, and no one will inspect them. Old Madam Pei's 60th birthday banquet was the following day. We did not seal the Marquise's estate during the night. If government troops arrived first, the Pei family would surely destroy the old evidence hidden in its secret chamber. I had the court detain the contraband boat, suppress the news and imprison every captive in a different place. Ji Mingyue returned to Fan Tower as usual and publicly claimed she was heading south with the auction money. Pei Shaoye would assume she had fled with his silver and never imagine that the river route had been cut. At noon the next day, carriages and horses formed a dragon before Xuanping Marquise's estate. Though the Pei family was buried in debt, its title remained. To restore her dignity, old Madame Pei invited imperial clansmen, nobles, and trade guild guests to her birthday banquet and set 100 tables. The gatekeepers accepted gifts until their hands ached. 20 large wooden chests bearing gift cards from various noble houses stood inside the second gate, the very shipment delivered from the southern ferry. I arrived without constables, leading the 326 creditors first. The gift announcer had barely finished crying, one pair of jade scepters from Duke Angwo's estate, when shopkeeper Zhou followed. Proprietor of Qin Company presents 1 volume of the Pei family's 9-year general ledger, 326 creditors, and debts of 224,000 taels. The entrance to the Marquise's estate fell instantly silent. Dressed in brilliant red birthday robes, old Madame Pei sat in the main hall and slammed down her teacup. Who allowed her inside? I displayed the capital prefecture audit order and led the accountants through the guests. The Pei family had accepted an official audit the previous day, so every object recorded in Qin accounts had to be inspected today. The gatekeepers dared not stop us, while the guests wished even less to be suspected of misappropriating an orphan's property and moved aside. The first object sealed was the 12-panel red sandalwood screen inlaid with mother of pearl in the main hall. It had belonged to mother's dowry and entered the Marquise's estate 9 years ago for temporary storage, only to become the splendor of the old madam's birthday hall. The second items were 4 Nanmu chests in the storeroom, holding father's collection of paintings and calligraphy. The third were 2 sets of rosewood tables and chairs in the guest courtyard. The fourth, a complete silverware service in the kitchen. And the fifth, the Juan inkstone, rare books, and white jade brush rest inside Pei Shaoyi's study. Each time an item was moved, shopkeeper Zhou publicly announced its old Qin account number, date of entry, and recipient. The Pei household cursed at first, but their voices gradually faded as capital prefecture clerks found Qin fire marks in cracks, bases, and hidden drawers. Watching the birthday hall emptied piece by piece, old Madame Pei's lips turned purple with rage. These objects have been used by the Marquise's estate for 9 years. They became Pei property long ago. I opened the original trust agreement, rubbing before her. Management is not a gift. If someone guards a gate for 9 years, does the gate belong to the watchman? Summoner among the guests laughed, then hurriedly covered his mouth with a sleeve. Humiliated into rage, she pointed at me. Qin Wangshu, after ruining my birthday banquet today, never dream of entering Pei gates again, I wrote. Rest assured, old madam. This gate will soon be used to settle debts as well. I find it inauspicious. The creditors roared their approval. Pei Shaoye finally hurried from the rear courtyard. He had likely heard that the contraband boat was missing. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, but he forced himself to remain composed. Move the things if you must, but do not disturb the guests. After grandmother's banquet, I will settle with you. As he spoke, he secretly gestured to the second gate guards. The 20 birthday gift chests began moving outside. I immediately blocked the gate and demanded that each gift be inspected. Pei Shaoye said coldly, "Have the birthday gifts presented to grandmother by other noble houses also become Qin property? If they are gifts from those houses, ask each giver to identify its own." The announcer read the gift cards one by one. The steward from Duke Angwo's estate stepped forward. took one look, and immediately shook his head. Our estate sent jade scepters in a single brocade case. We never presented a chest of this size. The other noble houses denied them one after another. Peixoye suddenly drew his saber and struck the lock of the nearest chest. I had prepared in advance. A female guard cast an iron chain around the hilt, while the capital prefecture clerks retreated to both sides. Shi Linyuan and the court constables rose from behind the guest seats and placed an ebony token upon the table. Open it. The lid lifted to reveal military crossbow mechanisms arranged beneath red silk. Each bore an armaments directorate number. Half the crossbow grooves had been filed away, yet they remained identifiable as ordnance reported damage 2 years earlier. Every guest's expression changed in an instant. Rotten cotton could still be blamed on a workshop. Privately hoarded weapons were sufficient to have an entire household confiscated. Old Madame Pei's flushed face turned white at once. She tried to rise, but the hem of her birthday robe caught on the emptied offering table, and she fell awkwardly to the floor. Shi Linyuan ordered the Marquise's estate sealed and every manager connected to the case detained. Peixoye did not resist. He merely stared fixedly at me. You knew the mechanisms were inside the birthday gifts. You did not bring the creditors today to move property. You wanted the entire capital to witness the Pei family's conviction. I wrote. You chose the birthday banquet, and you carried the chests inside. I merely came to collect an account. He could not answer. I turned to find Guizhou. She had been recording property behind shopkeeper Zhou, but now she was gone. One of her silver earrings lay beside the rear courtyard gate, with several fresh drops of blood nearby. Peixoye saw it as well, and a twisted smile finally surfaced in his eyes. A page boy rolled from behind the corridor with a note stuffed into his robe. Midnight, abandoned weaving mill, the Qin master ledger in exchange for Guizhou's life. Bring constables, and collect her corpse. Shi Linyuan immediately ordered the gate sealed and the estate searched. I picked up the earring and examined its back. A very faint horizontal scratch had been added to the silver setting. The signal Guizhou and I had agreed upon in advance. She had not been seized unexpectedly. She had discovered something more important than the weapons and followed deliberately. Guizhou's choice to enter the trap did not mean she was safe. Peixoye's men had dared take her under the noses of a mansion full of constables. That meant the abandoned weaving mill possessed an undiscovered passage, and that he still held something capable of reversing the game. I did not take the Qin master ledger, only an empty volume with an identical cover. Before leaving, I sprinkled colorless scented powder between its layered pages. When the powder touched soapy water commonly used by weaving mills, it turned purple and could not be washed from the skin even after 3 rinses. Shi Linyuan waited for me at the alley. You may not trust me, but tonight you cannot rely only on Qin guards. I passed him the abandoned weaving mill's old plans. They marked the canal, cellar, and 3 exits, but the western wall remained blank. Guizhou left a horizontal mark. It means west. She will drop silver thread along the way. Your men guard the 3 known routes. I enter from the west. Shi Linyuan said, I will take the west. They want me. If you appear, Guizhou dies first. Then what do you intend? I opened my cloak, revealing the soft iron armor I had not worn in time on the night at the northern warehouse, and a short crossbow at my waist. Shi Linyuan looked twice. At least this time you know to value your life. I wrote, not because you told me. Charge the armor to the court's accounts. I will not pay for it later. He gave a low laugh, then quickly suppressed it. Come out alive, and then we will discuss who pays. At midnight, only 1 lamp burned in the abandoned weaving mill's main building. I pushed open the door alone, holding the empty ledger where both hands could be seen. 3 masked men emerged from behind the looms. They first took my short crossbow, then bound my hands with rope. They did not recognize the thin cord-cutting blade inside my cuff and seized only the visible weapon. Set down the ledger and follow us into the cellar. I shook my head and wrote on the floor, let me see her first. The leader snapped his fingers, chains rattled upstairs. Guizhou was pushed toward the railing, blood on her forehead, though both hands could still move. When she saw me, she began scolding. My lady, why did you bring the real ledger? This servant's life is not worth the Qin family's decades of foundation. Even, as she scolded me. Her right hand flashed 2 signals behind the railing. 2 people down west. She was telling me that 2 truly important men had already descended into the western passage. The masked man accepted the ledger and immediately cut the sealing cord. Scented powder coated his fingers without his notice. When he opened it to blank pages, his expression changed sharply false. The thin blade in my sleeve cut through my ropes at the same instant. I spun and overturned the lampstand, plunging the mill into darkness. Kuiju drew an iron hairpin and stabbed the hand of the guard behind her, then seized his key and opened her lock. By the time the masked man lit a fire striker, I had drawn the short crossbow from my boot and pinned his sword hand with 1 bolt. Qin guards burst through the windows and subdued all 3 men in less than half a quarter hour. But the dull sound of a mechanism closing came from the western passage. Kuiju and I followed the silver thread she had left. The passage ended at an abandoned canal, where 2 figures carried an iron chest toward a boat. Shilinyuan's men had not moved because a powder fuse was tied around the chest, and 1 man held a lit striker. The men were the old pay steward who disappeared from Green Parasol Manor and Zhao Cheng's son Zhao Fu. Kuiju whispered. This servant saw them remove the chest from beneath the old madam's bed and deliberately let them capture me. Inside are remnants of the carriage accident collected by the county office 9 years ago, along with letters from Marquis Pei to Zhao Cheng. The old steward threatened them with the fire striker. Let the boat pass or everything burns together. Shilinyuan looked toward me and gave no order. It was my evidence, and he left the decision to me. I picked up a pebble and threw it toward the water. It landed to the boat's right, and the hidden constables mistook it for a signal. Their arrows flew toward the right as one. The old steward instinctively turned his head. I charged onto the wooden bridge from the left and hurled the empty ledger at his fire striker. The pages caught flame, but the fire fell into the water. At the same moment, Shilinyuan leaped aboard and severed the fuse on the chest with 1 stroke. Zhao Fu jumped into the river to escape but was caught in the fisherman's net downstream. Inside the iron chest were half a broken axle, county office seals, the bronze emblem from father's carriage, and 7 letters written by Marquis Pei to Zhao Cheng. The earliest letter read, Qin and Ji refuse to use black cotton and have agreed to present the accounts in the capital next month. First break the Qin carriage axle. The Ji family will then know fear. The final letter read, the Qin couple is dead, but Ji Chang retains a hidden ledger. Blame the Ji family and leave his daughter alive as bait for the remaining volume. The carriage plunged 9 years ago, the confiscation of the Ji family, and this year's fraudulent military supplies finally connected into one complete chain. The next day, the Ministry of War publicly inspected the goods at the Western City drill ground. 3,000 winter uniforms from the seized boat were arranged in 10 rows by batch. The Ministry of War, Armaments Directorate, Trade Guild, and Court of Judicial Review each sent inspectors, while the capital prefecture brought Pei Shaoyi, old Madam Pei, Zhao Cheng, and the implicated workshop owners. The moment Pei Shui entered, he pointed at the cargo labels. Qin Company's gold thread is genuine, proving Qin Wangshu made the goods. Even if the Pei family handled them, it merely transported them on her behalf. It was the final rope he could grasp. I did not argue. Instead, I first asked the inspectors to take 1 uniform from each row and remove its label. Genuine Qin inspection labels relied on more than gold thread. Their stitches also contained a hidden code. Every 10 garments formed 1 group. The starting stitch identified the branch, the number of back stitches identified the inspector, and the final stitch had to be concealed beneath the 3rd layer of the inner lapel. The labels on the contraband clothing were genuine, but every seam began at the outer lapel, proving someone had stolen an entire unused roll of inspection labels and sewn them onto fraudulent goods. After enduring the night, Zhao Cheng finally confessed that he stole the labels from Qin headquarters and delivered them to the Pei workshop. Pei Shui still insisted, the testimony of one traitor bribed by you cannot be trusted. I ordered 3 copper basins brought forward. The first held Qin Company's new cotton, the second ordinary old cotton, and the third black cotton from the contraband uniforms. When lit, the new cotton burned grey-white and odourless. The old cotton released faint black smoke. But the third basin produced acrid green smoke. its ashes mixed with medicinal residue, rotten cloth and clotted blood. An army medical officer found traces of arsenic fumigation medicine used in epidemic wards and blood from open sores. Worn against the body, it could easily ulcerate broken skin. Far from providing warmth, it might infect an entire camp. Curses thundered around the drill ground. I next presented Chin Company's 8th-month seal cancellation order. The false samples from Fengji compound, the seized boat's route, paybank loans, and 20 chests of military crossbow mechanisms. Each item could be explained away alone. Together they revealed a single path. Pei Xiaoyi borrowed money with the old seal. Ji Mingyue arranged the water route. Zhao Cheng stole inspection labels. Pei workshops made the fraudulent goods, and the Marquise's estate transported weapons as birthday gift. The final evidence consisted of the 7 letters and axle remnants from 9 years earlier. The moment old Madame Pei saw Marquis Pei's handwriting, she could no longer hold herself upright and collapsed to the ground. The old Marquis did everything. He is already dead. You cannot implicate the living in a dead man's crimes. Shi Linyuan said Pei Xiaoyi personally wrote this year's military contract banknotes and workshop payments. A dead man cannot sign in his place. The Imperial Clan Court announced on the spot that Xuanping Marquise's estate was suspected of privately hoarding weapons and embezzling military supplies. Its stipend was suspended pending trial. Pei Xiaoyi could neither seek confirmation as heir nor mobilize a single estate soldier until the case was resolved. The title of heir that he had worn for years, and that everyone had called him for just as long, was personally stripped from him at the drill ground by an Imperial Clan Court official. Pei Xiaoyi stood in the cold wind wearing only white underclothes, surrounded by black cotton torn from the fraudulent uniforms. Suddenly he laughed until his shoulders shook. Qin Wangshu, do you believe this means you have won? He removed a stack of letters from inside his robe and scattered them toward the onlookers. The first several were short investigative notes from Shu Linyuan to me, mentioning the Northern Warehouse night meeting, traveling together on the river, and meetings at the Qin residence. The next dozen carried suggestive handwriting. After your divorce, I shall naturally welcome you, and once the Pei family falls, the Qin family can belong to us both. Every letter was dated before I signed the divorce agreement. Pei Xiaoyi shouted, Shi Linyuan committed adultery with my wife long ago. They plotted together to seize the Qin estate and framed the Pei family for the military supply crime. Every so-called piece of evidence passed through the hands of these adulterers. Who can guarantee it was not forged? The crowd's angry curses abruptly stopped. He raised a guest house register. On the 20th day of the 8th month, Qin Wangshu entered Shi Linyuan's residence dressed as a man and remained all night. At that time, she was still a Pei wife. The innkeeper and servants can all testify. I had indeed visited that guest house on the 20th day of the 8th month. That night, I first discovered the fraudulent military contract and met Xia Linyuan for the first time. To avoid alerting the Pei family, I wore men's clothing and delivered anonymous account pages, then left through the rear door when heavy rain blocked the road. But the register recorded only my entrance, not my departure. Pei Xiaoyi had chosen the hardest matter for any woman to prove. The case concerned military supplies, yet he intended to nail the investigators to a pillar of adulterous shame first. The Imperial Clan Court registrar picked up a letter and immediately said, if Vice Minister Xi and Madame Qin were intimate before her divorce, every piece of evidence they handled must be recused and reviewed. As an unchaste woman, Madame Qin is also unqualified to manage her parents' estate alone. Xi Linyuan drew his sword, placed it on the ground, and removed his official seal before everyone. From this moment, I recuse myself from the military supply case. All evidence shall be transferred to the 3 judicial offices for review. He looked at me. Qin Wangshu, at the joint hearing before the Imperial Clan Court and Ministry of Justice in 3 days. You must answer the adultery charge yourself. Watching me, Pei Xiaoyi's eyes reignited with crazed satisfaction. He knew I could write 1,000 pages of accounts, but remained certain that a mute woman could not speak for herself under a hall full of interrogation. During the 3 days before the hearing, every tea house in the capital discussed the affair between Xia Linyuan and me. Storytellers turned the Northern Warehouse ambush into a tryst on a snowy night and the Tongji River interception into a failed elopement. Some even claimed I had known the Shi family before my marriage and that Shi Linyuan and I conspired for revenge after Pei Xiaoye stole me from him. The more absurd the story, the greater its audience. The military winter uniforms, crossbow mechanisms, and 224,000 tales of debt were forced into a corner. It was as though the moment a woman was accused of unchastity, her accounts ceased to be accounts, and even iron evidence pulled from a fire could turn to ash. The Pei family achieved its purpose. The 3 judicial officers suspended their review, and the 48 branches received another freezing order. Several merchants who had recently signed Qin contracts withdrew overnight. Some winter relief weavers were even barricaded inside by their husbands' families and forbidden to work again for an unchaste proprietor. Madame Liu brought more than a dozen workers to the Qin residence to apologize. Proprietor, we do not believe those words, but the men at home say that if we enter the Qin residence again, they will repudiate their wives. Some women were beaten and truly cannot come. I did not blame them. I paid their wages according to completed work and added 2 days' compensation for lost labor. Red-eyed, Madame Liu asked, if the Pei family takes control of you again, will our contracts still count? I wrote, yes, no matter who sits in Qin Company's accounting room. Every stitch you made will count. After they left, I had shopkeeper Joe list every merchant who withdrew without seeking compensation or persuading them to stay, only recording the date beside each name. They could leave today because of a rumor they would not return at the original price after Qin Company cleared its name. I also copied the 3 judicial officers' sealed evidence catalogue item by item and identified every letter Pei Xiaoye touched when he scattered the stack. There were 6 genuine letters, all official notes from Shi Linyuan during the investigation. 12 were false, imitating not his ordinary handwriting but characters taken from those 6 official notes. The forger had been careful. The paper was artificially aged, the ink varied in depth, and the fold lines resembled months of storage. Yet the closer the imitation, the more clearly it showed that the forger did not know one habit Shi Linyuan used in official letters. After signing each official letter, he pressed away the remaining ink with his fingertip, causing the final stroke to blur slightly leftward. It was no secret mark, only the result of a middle finger injury on his right hand from years of wielding a blade, which made it tremble after long writing. The false letters copied the forms, but their final strokes were clean and decisive. That could raise suspicion, but could not serve as conclusive proof. I needed to investigate the paper. The false letters used pure heart paper from Pine Cloud Studio with an extremely faint pine needle watermark pressed inside. Pei Xiaoye deliberately dated them in the 7th and 8th months to prove we had corresponded before the divorce. I sent men to Pine Cloud Studio, but the shopkeeper said this watermark paper had existed since the previous year and had too many buyers to trace through his accounts. I soaked a false letter in rice water, and a tiny character Yi slowly appeared beside the watermark. Pine Cloud Studio changed its papermaking mold each season. The Yi mold entered use only in the 9th month of this year. A letter written in the 7th month could not use paper made in the 9th. Even after seeing the Yi mark, the shopkeeper refused to testify and claimed his ledgers were missing. That night, his entire family moved away from the capital. The court's official seal was suspended, so Shi Linyuan could not mobilize men. Qin guards followed them to the southern gate and found only an empty carriage. The compartment showed signs of struggle, but the wheels had turned back toward the city. Someone had abducted the shopkeeper's family first. Pei Xiaoye had not improvised his smear. From the moment I discovered the false seal, he had prepared a second killing move if the military supply crime could not be concealed. He would turn the investigator into an adulterer, recast my resistance as elopement, and call every piece of evidence a conspiracy to seize property. Kuizhu asked anxiously, without the paper shop proprietor, who can prove the Yi paper began only in the 9th month, I opened the materials list for the 20,000 winter relief quilts. Every batch of Pine Cloud Studio paper used cotton yarn from Qin Silk House for its paper screens, and Qin Woodworks had carved the Yi mold. The paper shop could lose its accounts, but Qin delivery records, woodworking wages, and Citygate material entries could not all disappear. The Woodworks delivered the Yi mold to Pine Cloud Studio only on the 6th day of the 9th month. 3 independent accounts were sufficient to corroborate one another. As for the alleged guest house stay, I sought no witness. If Pei Xiaoye dared produce the register, he must already have bought the innkeeper and servants, instead of arguing over who saw me leave. It was better to prove that the book was not the original record from that day. On the 20th day of the 8th month, heavy rain collapsed the western city ward wall. The capital prefecture temporarily requisitioned roadside guest houses to shelter the people. All room numbers, occupants, and meals were recorded in a separate relief register and settled per person. Pei Xiaoye's private book claimed I stayed in room 7, but the official relief register stated clearly that 2 displaced families, 11 people in all, occupied room 7 that night. One room could not simultaneously house 11 commoners, Xi Linyuan and me. Our actual meeting took place in the guest house's front hall. Xi Linyuan had not formally accepted the case that night. I set the anonymous account pages on his table and left, remaining less than 1 incense stick from beginning to end. After preparing the evidence, I visited Benevolent Harmony Clinic. Dr. Liu, who had treated me for years, pressed down my tongue with a bamboo strip and made me exhale slowly. After I shouted, "Back on Tongji River," my throat hurt for 2 days. Yet it also felt as though a rusted shut door had been battered open, a crack. Your vocal cords are intact. The root of the illness has always been in your mind, Dr. Liu said. As a child, you watched your parents fall from the cliff. Each time you later tried to speak, your body believed it had returned to that day. Speaking one word proves the door can open. But speaking before a hall full of people 3 days from now may not be possible. I wrote, possible or not, I must do it. To win the case, I shook my head. Written words could keep my accounts, execute agreements, and curse others. Being unable to speak had never been my fault. But Pei Xiaoye turned my silence into shackles. Old Madame Pei wrote it into a false official contract, and the imperial clan court used it to judge whether I could manage my household. I would not speak to prove that a mute woman was innocent. I would make everyone who treated silence as consent hear with their own ears that I had never agreed. 3 days later, spectators packed the courtyard outside the Ministry of Justice Hall. The presiding panel consisted of the Vice Minister of Justice, the Chief Minister of the Court of Judicial Review, and the Vice Minister of the Imperial Clan Court. Xi Linyuan sat at the respondent's place, his sword and official seal surrendered. I stood on the other side, with no one to speak for me, only a writing desk and inkstone. When Pei Xiaoye was escorted into the hall, he had changed out of prison clothes. Claiming that Xuanping Marquis's estate had not yet been convicted, he preserved his dignity in plain white robes. His face was haggard, but his bearing resembled that of a pitiful husband betrayed by his wife. He first bowed deeply to the presiding judges. This criminal does not dare excuse the Pei family's crimes. If the military supply case proves to be my doing, I will submit to the law. But Xi Linyuan and Qin Wangshu first committed adultery, so the evidence they present may have been planted. I ask only that the 3 judicial officers appoint impartial officials to reinvestigate. The Vice Minister of Justice asked, "What evidence supports your accusation of adultery?" The 12 false letters, guest house register, 2 servants, and a tea maid claiming she had seen me enter Xi Linyuan's room appeared in turn. The tea maid wept with heartfelt conviction. Madame Qin wore men's clothing, so this servant did not recognize her at first. Later, she removed her bamboo hat, and Lord Xi personally wiped the rain from her hair. The 2 closed the door and remained together until dawn. An uproar swept through the spectators. The presiding judge asked me, "Madame Qin, do you have anything to say?" I lifted my pen, but Pei Xiaoye suddenly said, "My lord, she is most skilled at writing. Who knows whether she prepared those accounts and confessions long ago? This hearing concerns illicit relations. Ask her to answer aloud. If she cannot speak, at least permit her former Pei guardian to answer for her." The Vice Minister of the Imperial Clan Court actually nodded. The property trust document's authenticity remains unsettled, and the Pei family temporarily retains the name of former guardian. If Madame Qin cannot respond, Pei Xiaoye may answer on her behalf. The man accusing me would answer for me. It was absurd beyond measure, and precisely the outcome Pei Xiaoye desired. He came to my side and softened his voice. "Wangshu, come home with me. I will admit the uniforms were one moment of foolishness, and hand Ji Mingye over as well. If you say those letters are genuine, I will tell the Imperial Clan Court that Shi Linyuan deceived you and will not pursue your lost chastity." Looking at him, I suddenly remembered the year I was 12, when the carriage raced toward the cliff. I desperately tried to shout for father to turn around. It felt as though scalding iron blocked my throat. Even as the carriage fell, I could not produce a sound. Later, Pei Xiaoyi held my hand and said it did not matter that I could not speak. He would speak for me all my life. 9 years later, he truly stood here, prepared to speak for me. Only now he meant to describe me as a woman who betrayed her husband and fled, a madwoman with a heart ailment, unworthy of possessing her own name or property. I set down the pen and pressed my aching throat. The first breath produced no sound. The second produced only a rough vibration. The smile in Pei Xiaoyi's eyes deepened. He turned to answer for me. On the third attempt, I stopped him. "Pei Xiaoyi." The 3 syllables emerged slowly and were far from beautiful, yet the entire courtroom fell silent in an instant. He spun around, the blood gradually draining from his face. I gripped the edge of the table and breathed again. Every vibration of my throat hurt, but the words emerged more clearly than before. "My affairs do not require your answer." Samenu outside the hall gasped. Huizhu covered her mouth as tears suddenly fell. Seated far away, Shi Linyuan did not rise or speak. He merely slowly unclenched his fist. The presiding judge gestured for me to continue. I gave no lengthy defense. Instead, I first went to the tea maid. "You said Lord Shi wiped away my rainwater with which hand?" "His right hand. An old injury prevents the middle finger of his right hand from bending in rain." On the 20th day of the 8th month, he had just returned from examining a corpse outside the city, and a wooden splint bound that hand. The court's medical file can verify it. "How did the right hand you saw hold a cloth?" The tea maid panicked. This servant was far away. Perhaps it was his left hand. "You also said you recognized me only after I removed the hatch." More than 70 displaced people sheltered in the guest house front hall that night, and the wind extinguished the lamps 3 times. Through a crowd and heavy rain, you saw the face of a person in men's clothing and a bamboo hat, yet did not see which hand Lord Shi used. She knelt on the floor and could no longer answer. I had the capital prefecture officials submit the relief register. All 11 displaced people in room 7 had been found. 1 woman gave birth inside the room that night, with records from the midwife, clinic and neighboring rooms. The private guest house register claiming I stayed there contradicted the official relief book, while the innkeeper had disappeared. Pei Xiaoyi said, "The room number may have been recorded incorrectly. That does not prove you had no secret meeting." "Then examine the letters." I soaked a false letter dated in the 7th month in rice water, revealing the Yai watermark, then presented the woodworks order showing delivery of the mold on the 6th day of the 9th month, the silk house delivery receipt for cotton yarn used in paper screens, and the Western Gate material transport record. The Vice Minister of Justice verified them one by one. All 3 account dates agree. The Yai paper mold reached Pine Cloud Studio only in the 9th month. This paper could not have existed in the 7th or 8th. I placed the 6 genuine official notes beside the 12 false letters, asked a clerk to cover the content, and compared only the residual ink beneath the signatures. The difference between true and false was visible at a glance. The final person to enter the hall was Ji Mingyue. She wore shackles and no jewelry, only a blue cloth prison uniform. The instant Pei Xiaoyi saw her, his gaze changed. "Bitch, you dare come here." Ji Mingyue knelt before the presiding judges and submitted a surveillance order. On the 19th day of the 8th month, Pei Xiaoyi discovered that Madame Qin was investigating the old trade seal and ordered me to have her followed. When she entered the guest house on the 20th, Pei Men watched outside. The report states clearly that she remained only 1 incense stick in the front hall, then left for the Western City dye house. "You lie. Your fingerprint is on this report at the time. You knew she met Shi Linyuan to deliver military supply account pages, but you dared not expose it because you forged the contract. You raised the guest house only today, not because you suddenly discovered an affair, but because you always intended to use her reputation as a shield against the blade." Pei Xiaoyi lunged to strangle her, but constables pinned him down. The Vice Minister of Justice asked why Ji Mingyue was willing to testify. She raised her head. I found black cotton and transported contraband for the Pei family. I will admit the crimes I committed, but the Jai family carried a crime it did not deserve 9 years ago. I cannot watch him crush another person to death with the same method. The 3 judicial officers ruled on the spot that the 12 private letters were forged after the 9th month, and that the guest house register and witness testimony were false. Although Shi Linyuan still had to recuse himself because he had met me secretly, the 3 officers resealed and re-examined the military evidence. Shipment numbers, money routes, physical exhibits, and confessions all agreed and did not become invalid because the investigating official withdrew. When the vice minister of the imperial clan court still tried to argue that an unchaste woman is unfit to manage a household, I turned toward him. My voice remained hoarse but no longer broke. First, I was not unchaste. Second, Qin Company is private property left by my parents, not a chastity arch bestowed by the imperial clan court. A man keeps a courtesan, steals his wife's wealth, and makes fraudulent military uniforms, yet still petitions to become an heir. A woman receives one forged letter, and suddenly she cannot manage her own money. Under which law? The hall outside was silent at first. Then someone cried approval. The vice minister of the imperial clan court searched every law book before him and could not find a single article to answer. The presiding panel finally ruled Pei Shaoyi's false accusation. Forged letters, bribed witnesses, military supplies, weapons, and property seizure would be joined for trial. The Pei Property Trust Agreement had been erased and rewritten and was invalid from inception. All Qin assets would be unfrozen immediately, and no one could interfere on grounds of marriage, muteness, or former guardianship. The 2 servants and tea-maid confessed that a manager from the Marquise's estate threatened their families to force false testimony. Pine Cloud Studios' shopkeeper and his family were also rescued from the Pei family's southern city country house. As Pei Shaoyi was dragged from the courtroom, he suddenly stopped and looked at me. "You can speak," he murmured. "Wang Shu, when you were little, the first name you learned to say was mine." I looked at him. Then it was because I loved you. Today it was to convict you. The final light in his eyes went out. When I emerged through the Ministry of Justice gates, Shi Linyuan waited below the stone steps. He offered no congratulations, only a cup of warm water. Dr. Liu said you could speak no more than 30 sentences today. I took a sip. You counted 37. A fine. Charge it to the court's accounts. Charge it to your private account. Since meeting, it was the first complete conversation we had finished without paper, but peace lasted only half an hour. The prison cart escorting Pei Shaoyi to the court was ambushed in Changqing Lane. 2 death warriors from the Marquise's estate used powder to blow apart the axle, injuring 4 constables and freeing Pei Shaoyi. At the same time, the final hidden compartment in the Pei Inner vault was forced open, and both the missing half of the Jai military supply ledger and Marquis Pai's private seal disappeared. At dusk, a blood-stained letter arrived at the Qin residence. Pei Shaoyi demanded a seaworthy ship, 100,000 taels in cash, and my new trade seal. They were to reach the old Tungji River dock before midnight, or he would burn the second half of the ledger and leave my parents and the Jai family forever burdened by uncleared crimes. At the bottom, he added 1 sentence. "Wang Shu, this time you must come in person. Between us, there should finally be a true ending." After reading the extortion letter, Shi Linyuan's first words were, "The ledger can be lost. You cannot go." I did not argue. I merely turned over the letter. Brown silt stained the corner, mixed with tiny fragments of mussel shell. Among the 17 docks along Tongji River, only the salt flats downstream from the old dock had such mud. Pei Shaoyi was not bluffing. He truly was there and truly intended to flee by water. "The second half of the ledger is not the only evidence for conviction," Shi Linyuan said. "The first half, Marquis Pei's letters, the axle, and this year's money trail are sufficient to clear both the Qin and Ji families. He threatens you with the ledger because he knows you cannot abandon the original object left by your parents." I nodded. "Therefore, he will certainly wait for me. You still intend to go?" "Yes, but not to give him 100,000 taels and send him to sea." I had shopkeeper Joe bring the old dock's vessel register and selected a 3-masted salt ship named Returning Goose. It appeared sturdy, but had served for 27 years and was scheduled for dismantling the next spring. Most importantly, to reach the sea, returning Goose had to pass 3 locks controlled by Chin Company, and beneath its hull lay a double-layer ballast compartment Father had designed years earlier. Pei Xiaoye knew the Chin shops, but had never truly managed its ships. He understood that a trade seal could be exchanged for money. He did not know how many ways a ship could prevent a man from leaving. I placed 10 silver chests in returning Goose's visible cabin. The upper layer held true silver 10,000 taels in total, while the lower layer contained lead blocks of equal weight. The supposed new trade seal lay inside a brocade case. In truth, it was an iron seal of identical shape with no characters carved into its base. The cabin walls were soaked in salt water in advance, while the powder barrels were replaced with black sand scented with saltpeter. 20 of our strongest swimmers hid inside the ballast layer and breathed through air holes. The 3 locks beyond the old dock remained open, but their chains were changed to Chin Company's unique reverse clasps. Once the ship left shore, even the fastest man would need half an hour to release them. After hearing the arrangement, Shelin Yuan still refused to let me board. Someone can be disguised as you. Pei Xiaoye and I grew up together. He recognizes the old scar on my left wrist when I write, and every gesture I make. An impostor cannot deceive him. Then we attack by force. If he sees court men, his first act will be to burn the ledger and leap overboard. The riverbank is open. Without cover for archers, I need him to board returning Goose willingly and bring the ledger onto the ship we prepared. Si Linyuan was silent for a long time before asking, "Did you come to inform me or seek permission to inform you?" To my surprise, he nodded. "Very well. You have chosen to board, and I will not change that choice for you. But I want copies of every arrangement. The court takes command beyond the locks. I will not board before you light the blue signal. If the plan changes, light red, and I will attack at once." After the night at the Northern Warehouse, he finally understood that protection did not mean deciding whether I could come or go, but laying out the risks and allowing me to choose for myself. I handed him the final ship diagram. One more matter. If Pei Xiaoye asks, your men cannot reveal themselves, even if he places a blade against my throat. I will not agree to that. Si Linyuan, you may decide to take a risk. You cannot order everyone else to watch you die. He placed red and blue signal lamps before me. The blue lamp follows your plan. The red lamp follows my judgment. We each retain a road of retreat. That is cooperation. I studied him for a moment, then accepted both lamps. 1/4 before midnight, returning Goose docked at the old wharf. There was no moonlight on the river, only one white lamp at the bow. Pei Xiaoye stood beneath the eaves of an abandoned salt warehouse, 8 crossbow-bearing guards beside him. He wore the grey clothes of an ordinary travelling merchant and bound his hair with cloth. Were it not for the cloud-patterned boots permitted only in the Marquis's estate, he truly resembled a ruined merchant preparing for a long journey. He held no hostage and showed none of the wretchedness of a desperate man. Seeing me descend alone from the carriage, he even stepped forward as he once had when greeting me for a banquet. "Wangshu, I knew you would come." I ordered the driver to open the silver chests. He sent men to inspect each box, then lifted the iron seal from the brocade case and pressed it into paste for a test impression. When the blank base left no mark, his face darkened. "Where is the new seal?" I said aloud. "I will give it to you once we board." The sentence still emerged slowly, but no longer tore at my throat. Pei Xiaoye stared at me, his gaze distant for a moment. "Had you been willing to speak to me this way before, we would never have reached today. Before, I could not speak, so you never heard me today. I can speak, yet you still hear only what you wish to hear." The trace of nostalgia vanished from his face, and he gestured for the guards to escort me aboard. 2 of the 8 first searched below. They checked every plank, salt barrel, and rope, even thrusting long spears into the ballast hatch. The guards hid beneath the double floor, the spear tips passing less than half a palm from the nearest man. But no one made a sound. Only after Pei Xiaoye confirmed there was no ambush did he carry an oilcloth bundle aboard. As returning Goose left shore, he ordered the dock ropes cut to deny me any chance of regret. The ship had barely passed the first lock when the reverse clasp chain rose from beneath the water, abruptly slowing the vessel. A guard reported an iron chain across the channel, but Pei Xiaoye remained calm. Every Qin ship leaving for sea passes an anti-theft lock. Take the trade seal to the lock house, and they will release us. He brought me inside the deck house and placed the second half of the ledger on the table. The volume was thicker than the first half, with scorch marks around the cover's edge. Its first page held Ji Cheng's reply to father. Later pages included banknotes paid by Marquis Pei to Ministry of War inspectors, divided profits from the scrap iron foundry, and Zhao Cheng's signed receipt for the second axle set. Once the two halves were joined, every erased date and money trail from 9 years ago would be complete. I reached for it, but Pei Xiaoye pressed his blade across the ledger. First, sign the property transfer agreement. He opened a prepared document. Transfer Qin Company's 48 branches, 6 docks, every ship deed and every banknote into my name. Then write a confession admitting that you directed the fraudulent military supplies and Shell in Yuan framed the Pei family on your behalf after I write it. We leave together. I had assumed he wanted only money. I had not expected him to still intend to take me. Pei Xiaoye sat opposite, his voice returning to the gentleness of years before. Wang Shu, the Pei family is gone, and Ji Mingyue betrayed me. Only now do I see clearly. Everyone outside coveted my status and money. You alone did not. We will go to the southern seas. Qin trade routes can conduct business there too. You understand accounts, and I will deal with people on your behalf. We will begin again. You want me to confess to 3,000 poisoned uniforms and then begin again with you. The crime exists only on paper. Once we reach the sea, the laws of Great Zhou cannot touch us. He reached for my hand. I never intended those soldiers to die. After the first winter uniforms arrived, the frontier army would discover the problem and naturally demand replacements. We would already have the advance payment and could send several thousand good uniforms afterward. What if the first snow arrived before them? What war has no deaths? He frowned, as though annoyed that I dwelled on an irrelevant question. Wangshu, I was forced to do this too. After father died, the Marquis's estate owed more than 200,000 taels in old debts, while the imperial clan court intended to investigate my succession as heir. Without the military supply money, I could not preserve the title. Ji Mingyue held the Ji family's water routes and father's old ledger. If I did not grant her status, she would give everything to the court. Therefore, you used the divorce agreement to placate her. I never truly intended to abandon you, he hurriedly said. I planned to let her be mistress for 1 year, then send her away once I recovered the second half of the ledger. You would remain in the estate and manage Qing Company for me, and I would restore your title later. Who knew you would make the divorce real and drive the Pei family to death step by step? Even now, he believed my resistance had caused everything to collapse. I asked, who changed the axle on my parents' carriage 9 years ago? Pei Xiaoye's gaze flickered. Father arranged it. I was only 16 then. You knew, I learned afterward. After a moment's silence, he simply admitted it. Your father intended to deliver the old military accounts. Once the matter came to light, the Peri family, Ji family, and Ministry of War officials would all die. Father only wanted the carriage to fail halfway and delay their entry into the capital. Who knew it would rain on the mountain road and the carriage would fall? I was riding in the rear carriage. That is why I brought you into the Marquis's estate and cared for you for 9 years. He suddenly became agitated. The Pei family owed you 2 lives. Was giving myself to you not enough repayment? I married a mute orphan who suffered nightmares every day. Do you know how many years my friends mocked me? Looking at him, I finally understood that in his heart, the kindness of those 9 years had always been a debt. He had repaid his father's debt, so he believed he could abandon me in the rain, use me as a wager, steal my seal, and take my money. So long as he did not truly kill me, he still considered himself affectionate and honorable. It was not enough, I said. You did not give yourself to me. You used the money my parents left to support the Marquis's estate, then treated marriage as charity bestowed upon me. Pei Xiaoye's grip tightened around his blade. I do not want to force you. Produce the seal and sign. I removed a new trade seal from my sleeve and placed it beside the ledger. His eyes brightened as he reached for it. I held down the seal. First, Let me examine the final 3 pages. If you hide external debts that cannot be repaid, I will not transfer the branches to you. Knowing how cautiously I conducted business, he felt no suspicion. He moved the blade half an inch and turned to the rear pages. They recorded not only the old case from 9 years ago, but the distribution of this year's 480,000 taels in military funds. Pei Xiaoye received 120,000, old Madam Pei, 30,000. The Ministry of War Inspection and Transport officials 180,000, and the remaining 150,000 covered old Marquis's debts. Every name bore a private seal or fingerprint. I rapidly memorized the page numbers and amounts, then deliberately asked, "Why is your signature missing?" "Here." He pointed to a line of tiny writing inside the seam. "Father taught me that clear accounts leave no name, while hidden accounts are signed only with the left hand. The Qin family investigated for 9 years, and found nothing because he stopped midway." A very faint wooden sound came through the copper tube in the corner of the deck house. It was the listening tube for the ballast layer. Every word aboard travelled through the copper piping Father had designed to relay commands and reach the 20 guards below. Pei Xiaoye abruptly overturned the table and swung his blade at me. "You were tricking me into confessing." I was prepared. I dodged aside and seized the copper ruler, securing the sea chart to block his second strike. The blade hit the ruler, numbing the web of my hand. He snatched the ledger and spun toward the candle flame. I overturned the salt water pitcher and extinguished the candle, plunging the deck house into darkness. Hearing the disturbance, the guards outside immediately lit torches. Pei Xiaoye kicked open the cabin door, seized my hair and pressed the blade against my neck. "Make the men below come out, or I will kill her." The double-layer floor was lifted. The 20 guards did not charge, but stood below with crossbows ready. He forced me onto the deck and ordered his men to open the powder barrels. The first contained only black sand. So did the second and third. At last his expression changed. "You replaced the powder." "I prepared the ship, silver and seal. Why did you believe only the ledger was real?" He drew the blade across the side of my neck, opening a shallow cut, and roared toward shore. "Xi Linyuan, I know you are there. Open the locks, or she and I die together." There was no answer from the bank. Xi Linyuan honored our agreement and did not appear before the blue lamp was lit. Pei Xiaoye dragged me backward to the gunwale and ordered the guards to cut the lock chain. 2 dived into the water and quickly discovered that the reverse class could not be opened without a key. Returning Goose was trapped between the first and second locks with no retreat ahead or behind. "You even calculated the escape route." His voice trembled as he spoke beside my ear. "Wangshu, why must you destroy me? If I die, you will truly have no family left in this world." I looked at the unlit blue lamp at the bow. "You are wrong. Family does not use my parents' lives to force me to turn back. Without you, I finally have a home." I stamped hard on his boot and threw myself backward at the same moment. The soft iron armor stopped the blade, though it still cut my neck. The copper ruler slipped from my palm and shattered the mainsail's quick-release class. The thick sail soaked in salt water crashed down, trapping Pei Xiaoye and 2 guards beneath it. I rolled out from under the canvas, seized the blue lamp, and hurled it toward the mast. Its cover shattered, and blue flame rose instantly. Hundreds of torches ignited simultaneously along both banks. Caught swift boats surged from behind the reeds, archers sealing the deck. The guards in the ballast layer charged together, seizing blades first and then chaining the men trapped beneath the sail one by one. Pei Xiaoye struggled halfway out of the wet canvas, still clutching the ledger. When he saw Xi Linyuan board, he suddenly pulled out his hairpin, pierced the oilcloth, and tried to throw the volume into the river. I was closer than Xi Linyuan. He lunged, caught one corner of the ledger, and hung half over the gunwale. Pei Xiaoye fought me through the railing, tearing the pages with a harsh ripping sound. "Let go," Xi Linyuan shouted. This time, he was not shouting at me. 2 guards locked Pei Xiaoye's shoulders, but he refused to release it. Instead of pulling directly against him, I suddenly yielded half an inch with his force. He lost balance and instinctively grabbed the railing. The ledger fell into my arms. Xi Linyuan did not reach past me to seize the evidence. He first pulled me back from the gunwale. Once certain I stood steadily, he immediately released me and stepped away. Forced to his knees, Pei Xiaoye continued laughing. "What does obtaining the ledger change? My father is dead. Ji Chong is dead. and your parents are dead. All you recovered is a pile of dead people's names. I joined the two halves of the ledger. The broken lines across their covers fit without the smallest gap. The dead cannot return, but the living no longer need carry your crimes. The frontier soldiers need not die in poisoned clothing. That is enough. By the time returning goose was towed back to the old dock, dawn had broken. Chin workers who had travelled from every branch filled the bank, along with more than 100 weaving women involved in winter relief. They had not come to see Pei Xiaoye, but to receive the ledger missing for 9 years. Recorder Yan examined the binding seams and Ji Chang's private seal on both volumes at the dock. The Ji accounts, Qin accounts, Old Ministry of War files, and Marquis Pei's hidden ledger formed a complete chain. No page remained unsupported evidence. 3 months later, the military supplies and weapons case concluded. For forging military contracts, embezzling military funds, privately transporting weapons, falsely accusing witnesses, and helping conceal evidence of the crime 9 years earlier, Pei Xiaoye received combined sentences and was condemned to death pending final review. The imperial clan court erased Xuanping Marquis's title, and the estate's properties were auctioned to compensate military losses and private debts. Old Madame Pei was stripped of her noblewoman's rank and exiled 3,000 li for knowing concealment and forging the property trust agreement. Though Marquis Pei was dead, his title was posthumously revoked. The old cases of the Qin couple and Ji Chang were retried. The government officially overturned the Ji family's military supply conviction and recorded that Father Qin had attempted to report the exchanged goods. Zhao Cheng was sentenced for forging accounts and stealing inspection labels because he revealed the Pei country estate and was not the principal culprit. He received a reduced term of exile. Ji Mingyue admitted helping transport black cotton and concealing the weapons route. Because her testimony recovered the contraband vessel and corrected the old Jai case, she escaped death and was sentenced to 8 years of labor in a government workshop. All property she obtained went toward compensating the frontier army. The day before judgment was issued, Pei Xiaoye asked a jailer to request a meeting with me. He sent 7 messages in succession. The first 3 claimed omissions in my parents' old case. The 4th offered the Marquis's final hidden funds. The last 3 said only meet me once. I checked the evidence catalogue and confirmed he held nothing undisclosed, so I had no intention of going. But Kuizhu placed an old wooden box on my table. Inside was the first copybook I used after losing my voice at 12. Every page held simple words: eat, drink, open the window, afraid. Pei Xiaoye had drawn many crooked little figures beside them. On the final page he wrote, "Yeah, take your time. It does not matter if you cannot speak. I will always wait." The copybook had been missing from the Qin residence for years. The court found it while inventorying the Marquis's secret chamber. Pei Xiaoye had placed it in the same chest as the Qin trade seal, property trust agreement, and hidden military supply ledger. He could not bear to discard the past, yet that never stopped him from using the past to hurt me. In the end, I went to the Ministry of Justice's death prison. Behind 2 iron grills, Pei Xiaoye had grown almost unrecognizably thin. At the sound of footsteps, he shot to his feet, straightened his prison clothes, and smoothed his disordered hair, as though looking slightly more respectable could return us to the past. Wang Shu. The instant he saw the copybook in my hand, his eyes lit. "You still remember that year when nightmares kept you awake all night? I sat beside your bed. When you refused to eat, I fed you 1 bite at a time. Surely none of that was false." It was not. He had not expected me to admit it and hurriedly seized the bars. Then save me once. The weapons never left the capital, and the winter uniforms were intercepted. No one truly died. Go to the 3 judicial officers and change your testimony. Say Xilin Yuan forced you to trick me into speaking aboard the boat. The Qin family is wealthy. If you repay enough military silver, my sentence can be reduced to exile. Wang Shu, if I live, at least I can still repay you. With what? I can manage your external businesses and never see another woman. If you refuse to reconcile, I can serve as a manager in the Qin residence's outer courtyard. I will do anything you ask. Even in prison, he still believed his ability was a gift, and that my greatest loss was the absence of a Pei Xiaoye at my side. I passed the copybook through the bars. I did not come to save you. I came to return your property. He did not accept it. This was written for you. The words above are mine, the promise was yours, and you were the first to tear that promise apart. But I once saved you. That is why I loved you for many years and entrusted you with chin money, trust, and even the gates of my home. That sincerity repaid your kindness. It does not mean you can use it to cancel every crime you later committed. Pei Shui's hand slowly fell. He asked a question, unrelated to the case. Without Ji Mingyue, would we have remained happy forever? Number without her, there would have been another trade seal, and another sum of money you believed you could spend first and explain later. What you truly wanted was never Ji Mingyue. It was a Qin Wangshu who would never leave no matter how you treated her. In what way is Si Linyuan better than me? That has nothing to do with you. I did not leave you to exchange you for another man. The words seemed to crush him completely. He slowly slid down the wall. After a long time he looked toward the copybook and rasped, "You can speak now, but I will never again hear you call me Brother Shui." You heard it in court. That was the final time. I turned to leave. Behind me came the sound of pages tearing. Perhaps he meant to destroy the copybook, but stopped halfway. Only suppressed sobs followed me from the cell. I did not look back, nor did I attend his execution. Qin headquarters was conducting its first company-wide audit, with the accounts of all 48 branches delivered to the capital simultaneously. Whether a condemned man regretted his crimes at the end was not worth suspending an entire day's business. After the old case was overturned, I brought the 3 judicial officers' judgment to my parents' graves. When they were buried 9 years ago, I knelt here for an entire day without one word in my throat. During every annual visit afterward, I could only write the words I wished to say and burn them, as though the characters had to become ash before they could reach my parents. This time I burned no paper. I placed the judgment before the stele and spoke father's name, then mother's. My voice remained imperfect and stopped several times, but the mountain wind did not force it back into my throat as the rainy night did in my memory. Father, mother, the axle was not an accident. We recovered the ledger too. I told them the Jai family had cleared its name, the 3,000 winter uniforms never reached the camp, and Qin Company had reopened its doors. Only when I finished did I realize I had not mentioned Pei Shui's fate once. His ending should not become an achievement offer to prove my parents. What I truly wished to tell them was that the 12-year-old child left on the mountain road could now walk home by herself. I did not ride in a carriage down the mountain. I followed the old road from the accident step by step to the relay station. A new barrier had been built beside the cliff, and a tea shelter stood along the road for passing caravans. The proprietor did not know me and merely asked whether I wanted hot tea or cold. I said, "Hot," 2 perfectly ordinary words, and no one showed surprise. Only then did I understand that the finest outcome of speaking again was not making an entire hall tremble, but reaching a day when I could state my needs like anyone else without first proving my courage. After the 3 judicial officers confirmed that his investigative notes had no connection to private relations, Xie Linyuan was restored as Vice Minister of the Court of Judicial Review. On his first day back, he promoted a new rule. Military supply goods must retain 3 sets of samples from the supplier, inspecting official, and independent artisan. Cargo labels must be registered by batch, and no person may withdraw goods with a private seal alone. I, however, did not accept the second winter uniform order the Ministry of War immediately offered. Qin Company had only just been recovered from the Pei family. Its accounts were chaotic, and its internal traitors remained. Had I rushed to swallow an order for 7,000 garments merely to restore our standing, I would have been no different from Pei Shui. I first closed all 48 branches for 7 days and re-examined the people, accounts, and seals. Shopkeepers who remained had to accept responsibility for 3 years of past accounts. Those unable to explain abnormal expenses were paid and dismissed that day. Offenders were handed to the authorities. In 7 days, Qin Company dismissed 11 shopkeepers, reported 6 to the authorities, and promoted 23 female accountants who had previously been permitted to keep only small ledgers in rear rooms. On the 8th day, I accepted an order for 3,000 replacement winter uniforms. This time, No headquarters monopolized the project. 7 cotton guilds supplied materials. 12 tailoring workshops produced separate batches. 137 weaving households handled stitches and inspection labels. And retired veterans tested warmth. The inner label of each garment listed its maker, inspector, and material batch. Any error could be traced to its stage, while the first person to identify a problem received a reward. When the first 500 uniforms reached the northern border, the first snow of winter had just fallen. The army physician wrote that the clothing was not splendid, but it stopped the wind and did not harden when wet. The letter included receiving signatures from 500 soldiers. There was not one word of praise, yet it reassured me more than any imperial plaque. The auction of the Marquis's property did not fully compensate the military losses. I sold the 3 courtesan residences and 7 shops I recovered, then took another 30,000 taels from Qin profits to establish an old case compensation account. Some advised that I had not made the military supplies and had no need to fill the Pei family's hole. I still sent the banknotes to the Frontier Army's relief office. The crime was not mine, but the cargo labels once belonged to Qing Company. If a firm wants people to trust it again, it cannot merely prove innocence in court. It must also place those injured by its vulnerabilities into its accounts. Half a year later, the Capital Trade Guild elected a new leader. In the past, only male proprietors from 12 great firms were eligible. This time, 36 small workshops jointly nominated me. Others objected, claiming foreign merchants would mock a guild led by a woman. I did not exploit the military case to seek sympathy. On election day, I presented only 3 ledgers. The first contained Qin Company's new rules. Every large transfer required 2 seals, 2 sets of accounts, and verification in another location. The second recorded costs and inspection results for distributed winter uniform production. Profit was 10% lower than under the old system, but rework fell 70%. The third was the pay debt settlement book, showing the destination of every tael. I told the guild, do not choose me because I am a woman mistreated by her husband, or because I spoke again in court. Look only at these 3 ledgers. If anyone can accomplish the same result at lower cost, with fewer bad debts and clearer responsibility, I will vote for him. I was elected the Capital Trade Guild's first female leader by a margin of 4 votes. My first proposal did not seek business for Qin Company, but established time limits for commercial trusteeship. Whenever an orphan's or widow's property was managed by relatives, annual accounts had to be reported to both the trade guild and government. Upon expiration, the property returned automatically. Marriage, illness, or family kindness could not extend control indefinitely. On the day the proposal passed, Recorder Yan held the new rule and cried for a long time. He said that had this article existed 9 years ago, the Pei family could not have obtained blank official paper, and the Qin family would never have been dragged into today's disaster. I knew one new rule could not change every life. At least the next girl to lose her parents would not have to burn down a marquis's estate merely to recover her own gate key. 3 months later, the Qin residence's western courtyard became an accounting school. Its first class admitted only 12 students. Some had physical disabilities, some had been repudiated and returned home, while others were simply poor and illiterate. They did not first need to prove themselves pitiful or sign bondage contracts. They spent 3 months learning to read, keep accounts, inspect goods, and understand agreements. Those who wished to join Qin Company could sit an examination. Those who did not could seek work elsewhere. When Madame Liu brought her daughter, the girl was too nervous to speak a single word. I did not press her. I merely pushed over the abacus and first taught her to move 1 bead. It took me 9 years to understand that a person who cannot speak does not most need someone else to speak for her. She needs someone willing to wait until she can fully express herself in her own way. Shi Linyuan visited the school more often than Qin headquarters. The first time he brought newly printed court anti-fraud contracts and asked the students to test-read them. The 12 girls identified 7 pieces of official language they could not understand, and he returned to rewrite all of them in plain speech. The second time, he brought 3 chests of old books returned after the pay case concluded. While inspecting them, Kueju found a brocade box hidden at the bottom. It contained a marriage agreement. I did not open it and had it returned exactly as it came. Shi Linyuan personally arrived the next day to ask, "Why did you return it?" There was no matchmaker, no exchange of names, no betrothal gifts, only a marriage agreement resembling an official document. Did Lord Shi come to propose marriage or open a case against me? I thought you disliked elaborate formalities. If I dislike them, I can remove them. If you remove everything before sending it, you are still deciding for me. Blocked beneath the corridor, he stood for a long time before nodding. I thought myself clever. Then where should I begin? First, go home. And then, wait until I finish this season's work. He truly waited 3 months. During that time, he sent no gifts under the pretext of a case, allowed no she-elder to pressure my door, and claimed no promise through the debt of saving a life or the bond of cooperation. Every 10 days he merely sent one blank sheet with a date in the lower left corner, and no other words. If I had something to say, I wrote. If not, I kept it blank. On the 9th sheet, I wrote my first reply, "Tomorrow is a rest day, we can dine." He arrived so quickly with the paper that he had not even changed from his official robes. Kueju stopped him at the gate. "Lord Shi, my lady said only that you could dine. She did not agree to marriage." "I know," he said, "entering the gate for a meal is already an improvement over the first brocade box. We did not truly discuss marriage until the spring of the following year. This time, Shi Linyuan hired a matchmaker and formally visited with Shi elders. The betrothal gifts were not extravagant. At the end of the gift list lay another draft marriage agreement with only 3 clauses. First, after marriage, Qin Wangshu shall remain head of the Qin family. Her property, trade guild office, and name shall not change, and the Shi family shall not interfere. Second, both spouses shall retain authority to decide their own affairs and may not conceal risks or make choices for the other in the name of protection. If official business requires secrecy, an explanation must follow afterward. Third, if one day Qin Wangshu no longer wishes to continue the marriage, Shi Linyuan shall unconditionally sign a divorce agreement, withhold no property, destroy no reputation, and use no debt of kindness as coercion. After reading it, I took my pen and changed every instance of Qin Wangshu to both spouses. Shi Linyuan asked, "Why change it? These were meant to protect you. If it binds only you and not me, it is not equality. If one day I use your case files to profit Qin Company, or pressure you through the guilds to bend the law, you should have the right to leave as well." He looked for a long time before pressing his fingerprint beside the revisions. "Agreed." I added a 4th clause: if we had children, one would take the Shi surname and one the Qin surname. If there was only one, the child could choose upon adulthood. The Shi elders coughed repeatedly beside us. Without even turning his head, Shi Linyuan wrote, "Agreed." The matchmaker could not help laughing. Other couples discuss an auspicious day, residence, and betrothal gifts. You two behave as though trying a case. I closed the agreement. If the worst outcome is written clearly first, the good days ahead need not depend upon guessing. The wedding was set for the 16th day of the 5th month. There were no 10 Lai of red bridal splendor, nor did I use Qin wealth to cover the long street. I departed through the Qin residence's main gate carrying only my own clothes and the marriage agreement. At the gate, Kueju lowered the red veil over my face, her eyes swollen from crying. My lady truly has a home this time. I clasped her hand. I have always had a home. Marriage adds another. It does not mean surrendering this one. She froze, then broke into laughter through her tears. Shi Linyuan stood outside. He did not step in to hurry me or reach for control of my dowry list. First, he bowed to the lintel of the Qin residence, then asked, "Head of the Qin family, are you willing to travel with me today?" I did not immediately place my hand in his. I looked back toward the accounting room in the main courtyard, the eastern warehouse gate, and the western school. Morning light streamed through the doorway. 12 newly graduated female accountants stood under the corridor, each holding an account book she had made herself. The new girls gathered behind them, and no longer lowered their heads as they had on the first day. These were what I had truly recovered from the divorce agreement Pei Shoye gave me. Not a more powerful man, not a wedding that made my former husband regret, and not the title of trade guild leader. It was the right to write my name alone on an agreement, to make decisions without anyone's approval, and to love someone without first surrendering the key to my home. I crossed the threshold and placed my hand in Xilin Yuan's palm. "Let us go." He closed his hand around mine but did not pull. He merely walked beside me. Behind us, a new day's reading began in the accounting school. The teacher asked, "What should be written on the first line of an account book?" A girl's clear voice answered, "Your own name first." Another girl asked, "What if someone forbids you to write it?" Before the teacher could answer, someone in the courtyard had already opened her newly issued ledger. 12 pens touched paper together. Some ink was dark and some pale, and not every character was straight, but not one hand stopped. I listened outside the gate for a moment and did not enter to answer for them. The school had never meant to teach only the abacus. They would learn to read agreements, distinguish false seals, and preserve evidence. They would know that kindness could not replace accounts and marriage could not consume a name. When they one day encountered a door that refused to open, they might not all need to fight for their lives. At least they would know the key could remain in their own hands. Many years earlier, Pei Shoye used a divorce agreement to placate a courtesan, believing it was my punishment. Only later did he understand that it was not a door through which he had cast me out. It was the first door I pushed open for myself. To all you rational thinkers, this ledger-style reckoning has now reached its complete conclusion. Looking back across the whole game, Qin Wangshu offers the most grounded and universally applicable strategic logic in this series. A mute woman defeated official hearings, law court, and criminal tribunals not through a remarkable political alliance or supernatural power, but through two things: the indisputability of accounts and the complete record she built across 9 years of what was owed, what was used, and what was hidden. 3 details are the most precise components of this system. First, the anti-counterfeit gold thread in the ledger spine. This was not an improvised response, but a system for verifying trust established before everything began. The Qin trade seal received a hidden pattern. Ledger spines used gold cord thread of different thicknesses and colors each year, with the formula held only by the proprietor. When Zhao Cheng produced a forged ledger, she did not need to argue. She merely needed to light a flame. The thread's ash became the judgment. Someone who had already constructed an entire anti-forgery system, even after losing the trade seal, and being stripped of power, did not spend those 3 years merely enduring humiliation. She was installing a touch-triggered fuse beneath every fraudulent account. Second, the method by which she rebuts the accusation of adultery. Pei Shoye's final killing move was to contaminate every piece of evidence as false accounts created by adulterers. He chose an ancient logical trap. Once a woman is accused of unchastity, all her other claims automatically lose credibility. Qin Wangshu did not defend herself from the position of my innocence that would trap her in an unwinnable dispute over private virtue. She began with the paper's physical timeline. The Yi paper mold arrived at the shop only in the 9th month, so a letter dated in the 7th could not use paper from the 9th. 3 independent accounts cross-confirmed one another and could not be forged together. She dismantled a moral attack with physical evidence and chronology, forcibly turning the trial of chastity the enemy desired back into verification of evidence. This was reframing the problem from a higher dimension, not striking head-on. Third, the 37 sentences she spoke after regaining her voice in court. Dr. Liu said she could speak no more than 30, yet she spoke 37. More importantly, consider how she used them not to plead emotion or make an appeal, but to ask a succession of precise questions. Each question was a logical trap that made the witness expose herself through her own answers. The tea maid claimed she saw Xilin Yuan wipe rain away with his right hand. Qin Wangshu asked which hand, then asked how an injured right hand bound to a splint could hold a cloth that day. She never said, "You are lying." She made the lie collapse beneath the weight of its own details. 9 years of silence honed an extraordinarily precise use of language. Every word served a purpose, and not one sentence was wasted on emotional release. Yet what fascinates me most is the direction chosen for the ending. She won and then built a school, promoted a new time limit rule for trusteeship, and used her position as the trade guild's first female leader to propose a new provision. Property managed for orphans and widows must be reported annually to both parties and returned automatically when the term expires. She did more than save herself. The door she had opened only by burning down an entire marquis's estate became a new road. At the Chin school, the teacher asks, "What do you write first in an account book?" And a girl answers, "Your own name first." Those words are the story's true ending and what Qin Wangshu truly wins. Not a judgment declaring her innocent, and not a husband more respectable than Pei Xiaoye. But this, a woman's name can stand alone in her own accounts. It requires no one's approval and can be signed by no one in her place. If you also appreciate this cool-headed narrative that reconciles every IOU, false seal, old kindness, and 9 years of grievance against the facts settling each entry without one coin too many or too few, please like, comment, and subscribe to register your systemic approval. I am Maggie Liu. Accounts do not lie, and you must write your own name. Until our next game, goodbye.